Sometimes, when Regulus is in a good mood, when he feels safe, he'll let James touch him. Not in a sex way, though there is a bit of that too. Something in the space between them that cracks and sparks and burns. But these touches are different. They're soft and exploratory and caring. Like James can pull all of Regulus's wounds closed, like he can rub away his scars, like he can teach him how to love his skin. He can tell that he doesn't, that Regulus and his body have a difficult relationship. James runs his hands gently through Regulus's hair, along the outline of his jaw, his lower lip. He counts the ribs in his chest and circles every one of his knuckles, worshipping him. Regulus closes his eyes and breathes in deep, slowly letting himself relax, taking down his walls piece by piece until it's just him, naked even while fully clothed.
You're obsessed.
James isn't sure how long they've been lying here like this. A while, probably.
With you? Absolutely.
He sees the corner of Regulus's mouth twitch upwards and feels satisfaction purr in his chest before he leans forward and presses a quick kiss to his lips. He likes being able to do that, casually. Likes how natural it feels. He's currently drawing small circles on the inside of Regulus's wrist.
We should probably go back soon.
Regulus blinks his eyes open and turns to James, all soft and sleepy. This is James's favourite Regulus. I mean, he likes them all, but this one especially.
You're such a baby, you know that.
It's been mentioned.
James draws his finger slowly up Regulus's arm, making the other boy shiver, eyes fluttering closed again.
Cheating.
When he has good days like this, and this is an exceptionally good day, James realises just how sensitive Regulus is. The lighter the touch, the more it seems to take him apart, untangling all those knots that keep him together.
I can't cheat if there are no rules.
There are rules. The rules are don't get caught.
No one can find us here.
I wouldn't put it past Sirius. Especially if you don't come back for the second night this week.
James's hand stills, and even though he tries to recover, moving it again a second later, Regulus notices.
James?
James doesn't look at his face. Instead, he focuses on where his finger is currently moving along the skin just under Regulus's collar.
Something you want to tell me?
James pauses for a moment before letting his hand drop down onto the mattress.
Only if you promise not to freak out.
Regulus's eyes narrow.
That doesn't sound promising.
It's really not a big deal.
James, please tell me what's going on and what it has to do with my brother.
Right, sorry.
James frowns when Regulus sits up, pulling away from him.
So, Sirius might know that I'm seeing someone.
James can feel the stillness rock through Regulus, like every muscle in his body is just clenched.
He doesn't know who, just knows that it's some boy.
Boy? He knows you're seeing a boy.
James can see him scrambling to pull his walls back up again.
Reg, it's okay.
James sits up now too.
He doesn't care, honestly.
This does nothing to ease the tension out of Regulus's expression. He doesn't respond, just keeps looking at James like he can't believe he could be so stupid.
You're angry at me.
James feels himself deflate. He really doesn't want to fight about this. The tense silence continues, but James can see Regulus chewing on the inside of his cheek, fighting with himself.
I'm not thrilled.
Really, Reg. I didn't give him any details, I needed to tell him something if I was going to keep sneaking off.
And it couldn't have been something a little further from the truth?
Not if he was going to believe it.
Regulus shakes his head.
You're rubbish at keeping secrets, James Potter.
But there's the hint of fondness there that gives James hope.
I swear he has no idea it's you.
I know he doesn't. You wouldn't be here if he did.
James scrunches up his face.
Sirius doesn't decide who I can and can't see.
Regulus looks at him skeptically, but before James can push the matter any further...
He was okay with it?
Okay with it.
James's brain needs a minute to catch up.
Oh, with me seeing a bloke, you mean?
Regulus nods, and James wonders how much of his life Regulus has spent worrying about Sirius's reaction to this part of him. It makes his chest ache.
Very okay with it, yeah. Actually, he was...
James rubs at the back of his neck.
He was asking me about you the other day.
He was asking about me.
Well, he didn't know it was you specifically, but he was asking about the boy I'm seeing, yeah.
Regulus sits with that, mind turning behind his eyes. His expression is more serious than James would like it. Almost sad.
What did he ask?
James feels his face heating up.
I don't know, just like stuff.
Stuff. Oh my god. You were talking to my brother about sex. Sex. With me. Oh my god.
Regulus's hands go to his face, shielding it from view. It's honestly so adorable that for a moment James isn't sure it's actually happening.
Have a little faith in me, Reg. I didn't tell him anything.
He bites back a smile.
I don't believe you.
I swear I didn't.
He puts his hands up even though Regulus can't see him.
I just told him that we haven't, gone all the way. But that I like what we've been doing and...
James does not get to finish that sentence because at that moment he has a pillow thrown in his face.
I hate this.
Regulus says it while tackling James onto the bed so it takes some of the sting out of it. Regulus hovers above him, pinning his shoulders down.
No talking to my brother about sex.
Have you met Sirius?
Regulus rolls his eyes.
No talking to my brother about sex. With me.
But he doesn't know it's you, so it doesn't count.
It counts.
Regulus gives him a flat look that slowly grows more serious.
You really shouldn't be talking to him about me at all. Okay? It's not... He'll figure it out.
James can feel the tension returning to Regulus's body. Honestly, it's a testament to how far they've come that this has gone as well as it has.
I'm not going to let that happen, okay? Not as long as you don't want it to.
James brings his hand up to hold Regulus's face, thumb stroking his cheek.
I told him he can't know. He respects that.
I promise you he doesn't. So just... don't tempt fate. Okay?
Okay.
James lifts himself up just enough to reach Regulus's mouth, kissing it quickly before collapsing back down.
Honestly.
Regulus is shaking his head.
First Lupin, now this.
Yeah, I know. Wait, I'm sorry, what? How do you know about Remus?
Regulus shrugs, like it's the most casual thing in the world.
We've had words.
James arches his brow.
That sounds ominous.
It was honestly very civilized for the most part.
Oh, was it? Was there tea and scones? Did you discuss the weather? Your mother's new hat?
Regulus rolls his eyes.
You're ridiculous.
Says the guy who did wall bangers off a silver platter.
That was one time.
Somehow they end up wrestling, pushing and pulling on one another, rolling around in the gigantic bed. This is it, James thinks. This is all I want.
Okay. Enough.
They part, lying next to one another, Regulus's hair an absolute mess. It makes James smile.
You're in a good mood today.
James watches Regulus's eyes flicker. Eventually the younger boy rolls towards him.
It's been a good day.
And part of James wants desperately to know why. And how he can make all of Regulus's days good. Because he'll do it. Whatever he needs. But mostly he knows that's not how it works. That it's not a fair thing to ask someone for the answers to themselves. It sounds too much like trying to fix something. He never wants to make Regulus feel like he's broken.
I'm glad.
They stay like that, silently for a minute, before James starts to smile again.
You ready for the party?
Regulus rolls onto his back.
Merlin, don't remind me. Evan's been obsessing over it for weeks.
There's a 7th-year Slytherin, Corbin Yaxley, who discovered in his 3rd year at Hogwarts that he and the Bloody Baron have the same birthday. He therefore declared it a house-wide holiday. So every year the entirety of Slytherin House celebrates. The Bulg kids skiving off classes, the Boulder kids going to class already drunk. As much as James dislikes Slytherin, he does have to hand it to Yaxley. He knows how to get people to party. And James can always appreciate a little mindless chaos.
He's making some kind of special punch.
Regulus wrinkles his nose.
I can only imagine what's going to be in that.
James smiles.
You're gonna get wasted and then sneak up to the astronomy tower and kiss me.
Regulus rolls his eyes, though the tops of his cheeks do turn a shade of pink that warms James's chest.
I don't know. Are you going to have a panic attack when I do?
James shrugs.
Might. Depends on how good the kiss is.
All my kisses are excellent. I promise you. Quality, will not be an issue.
Oh yeah?
James's eyes are bright, staring intently at Regulus as he inches closer.
Prove it.
There's no reason for Regulus's chest to hitch. No reason for him to look at James the way he does then, like they haven't already kissed for hours. But he does, rolling back onto his side, hand reaching out so he can run a knuckle down the side of James's face.
If you insist.
His breath is warm.
But you have to promise me you'll remember to breathe.
James smiles.
Promise.
Regulus's hand slides to the back of James's head, pulling him forward, taking his mouth. And James lets him. Again. And again. This is it. This is all I want. James sits against the headboard of his bed, tossing a snitch up and down. He really should keep track of these things. Eventually Hooch is going to realise she's missing a dozen of them. Maybe more, honestly. He's technically supposed to be doing Transfiguration homework, but he's in too good of a mood to focus on school. He's been riding the high of the night before all day. It had just been so good. So warm and soft and happy. He smiles just thinking about it, hand curling around the cold metal in his palm, feeling the vibration of the snitch's wings.
What'd you get for question 6, James?
Remus is on the floor, notes and textbooks spread around him. James looks back down at his blank parchment.
I got acromantula venom.
Peter is on his own bed. He has one quill behind his ear and another in his hand. There are a plethora of parchment and books surrounding him too, though in a somewhat less organised fashion. Both Remus and James turn to look at him.
You got acromantula venom for number 6.
Yeah? Is that wrong?
Remus, if anything, just looks concerned.
You got acromantula venom, a very rare potions ingredient. For the question, what are the limits of transfiguration?
Okay, I'm getting the sense that that is definitely not the answer.
Peter's eyes bounce from Remus to James.
How did you even?
But at that moment, the door to their room is thrown open and Sirius waltzes in, throwing his book bag on the ground and staring at the rest of them with a look in his eyes that can only mean trouble.
Lads.
He stands in front of the window, which really adds to the drama of the situation. Hands on hips, long hair let loose.
I have just created the best charm of all time, and I know exactly what to do with it.
James lets the snitch in his hand fly off as he slides closer to the edge of his bed.
Go on then.
I thought we were doing transfiguration homework.
Remus looks very determinedly at his textbook and not at Sirius.
This is better.
Sirius is clearly excited enough to ignore the obvious tension between him and Remus.
Pete, get off your bed.
What?
Off. You. Now.
Peter reluctantly climbs off his bed and Sirius immediately whips out his wand, pointing it at the aforementioned piece of furniture and making 3 swift slashes.
Sternius remtactus.
All of them stare, waiting for something to happen. Nothing does. James rubs the back of his neck.
Never thought I'd say this, but I think Transfiguration homework might actually be better than this.
Sirius doesn't look the least bit deterred.
Go on, Pete. Back on the bed. Hop to it.
Peter narrows his eyes skeptically.
Do I look like an idiot?
Sirius arches his brow.
Do you want me to answer that?
No, fuck you.
Buy me dinner first, then we'll talk.
Peter proceeds to go an alarming shade of magenta, quickly looking away from Sirius.
Leave him alone, Sirius.
Remus still isn't looking up from his coursework. Sirius turns to him, a mildly stung expression on his face. Truth be told, James has no idea what's going on with the two of them anymore. Remus has started to be okay with sharing the same space as Sirius, but they still don't really talk much. Not to each other and not to James and Peter. All James can get out of them is, "We're fine. We're not fighting anymore." Which are both clearly lies. Eventually, Sirius tears his eyes away from Remus and back to Peter, who has inched his way carefully closer to his bed.
What's it gonna do?
What makes you think it's going to do anything?
6 years of friendship.
That brings a grin to Sirius's face.
It's nothing bad, I promise.
Peter does not look at all convinced.
You get on it then.
Peter, what did I just tell you about buying me dinner first?
Peter rolls his eyes.
Listen, there's no way in hell that I'm...
Tired of the bickering, James reaches over and gives Peter a shove, sending him stumbling onto his bed. The end of the mattress immediately lifts off the frame, knocking Peter onto the ground and making what almost looks like a mouth. A gust of dust blows out towards Sirius before the mattress falls back down into place. Sirius grins, wiping the dust off his robes and fixing his hair.
Brilliant, right?
What the hell was that?
Peter gets back to his feet.
I'm with Pete.
James swings himself off his own bed and sits closer to get a better look.
You modified the Sternius charm.
Remus draws all of their attention to him. He's still sitting on the floor, parchment slightly ruffled from the mattress. He blinks before looking up at Sirius.
To work on inanimate objects?
Sirius nods, grin growing slightly sheepish.
And to respond to touch instead of just going off continuously.
Remus looks a little dazed.
That kind of spell modification is extremely advanced.
Sirius just shrugs.
I was bored.
If it weren't for the fact that Remus was already on the floor, James would be worried he was about to swoon.
You were bored?
The pair of them are still staring at one another. It's the longest eye contact James has seen them make in ages.
Sorry to interrupt,
He causes them both to startle.
but what's the Sternius charm?
Sneezing charm.
The mischief returns to Sirius's eyes.
Used in duels to distract your opponent. I modified it to work on objects and then to respond to touch.
James smiles back.
Wicked.
Ah, but that's not the wickedest part. Do you know what tonight is, Prongs?
Did I forget your birthday again?
You've never forgotten my birthday.
Really? Cheers to me then.
Sirius bites his lower lip, trying to stay in character.
Use that dear brain of yours. It'll come to you.
And it does.
Bloody Baron's party.
James is starting to smile now too.
I already hate where this is going.
Sirius and James only have eyes for each other.
We wait until they're all smashed, and then we sneak in and...
Pete, what the hell?
He helps his friend back up off the floor.
I thought it might have worn off.
Peter rubs his shoulder.
Oh no, it's got a lifespan of at least 12 hours.
12 hours? Jesus, what's the counter charm?
Sirius shrugs.
Don't have one. Didn't have time.
You cursed my bed without...
Shh.
Sirius holds out his hand.
Not important right now. What is important is that you lot learn the charm so that we can sneak into the Slytherin dormitories and curse all their beds while they're getting sloshed.
Absolutely
Yes.
not.
Oh, come on, Remus. We haven't pulled anything in ages.
Remus looks back at him, unmoved.
If you want to go and act like idiots, be my guest. I'm not going to stop you. I'm just saying I'm not interested.
It'll be fun.
James feels suddenly desperate to have the four of them back together again, acting like they always have.
It's juvenile.
Exactly.
Remus rolls his eyes, picking up his quill and going back to his transfiguration homework. James looks to Sirius for help. Usually convincing Remus to do stupid things is his forte. But, of course, he realises as their eyes meet that Sirius can't be that person anymore. James stares down at Remus, trying to decide on the best course of action. Eventually, he walks over and proceeds to get down on the floor and physically lie across Remus's notes.
Ugh, James.
He looks up at his friend, brow arched.
Come on, Moons. Come be an idiot with us.
He sees a flicker in Remus's armour, the first crack. He really is a lot like Regulus sometimes, even more than Sirius.
I'm just going to lie here until you say yes. So if you don't want McGonagall to tear into you for not getting the homework done, it's really in your best interest to agree.
Please. I'd tell her what happened and she'd give me a biscuit and a pat on the back.
Teacher's pet.
Every other teacher is obsessed with you. Let me have McGonagall.
You two really do have a weird connection.
It's called exasperation.
James smiles and, to his delight, Remus smiles back. He reaches out and pokes Remus's knee.
Pretty please.
Remus rolls his eyes.
Yes, fine, all right. But only because you look so pathetic.
James's smile widens.
You're my favourite. I ever tell you that?
Oi, what about me?
Sirius cuts back in and James turns to him as he pulls himself off the floor.
You're my favourite too.
Can't have more than one favourite, Prongs. Then you're just being greedy.
Watch me.
James dusts himself off.
So, what's the plan?
They have to practice the spell for almost 2 hours before they're all able to get it right. They don't try it on any more beds. One of them being bedless is more than enough. Instead, they practice on the bar of soap in the bathroom, on one of James's trainers, on a sock. Eventually, most of the items in their room seem to have developed allergies.
I still can't believe you charmed my bloody bed.
They decide it makes the most sense to split up. Remus and James will take the invisibility cloak and charm the beds in the boys' room, while Peter, as a rat, and Sirius, using disillusionment charm, will take the girls. They're focusing on the 5th, 6th, and 7th years, for time purposes mostly, though Remus also staunchly refuses to prank 11-year-olds. Something about scarring them for life.
You have the password for the common room?
Sirius grins.
I do. Turns out Madeline Avery thinks I'm very charming.
Ha ha. And the girls' dorm? How are you going to get up there?
Sirius arches his brow.
I told you. Madeline Avery thinks I'm very charming.
The smug look on Sirius's face quickly disappears. James is honestly buzzing. The 4 of them, working together, plotting against Slytherin. It feels right. Falling back into something well-known and comfortable. And sure, it's not exactly the same. Remus and Sirius are still a bit off with one another, but it's close. It was hard last year, this summer. But things are getting better. Things are good, even.
You warned Regulus about this.
They make their way towards the Slytherin common room. Sirius and Peter just up ahead. Every once in a while, if James focuses on the right spot, he can see the outline of Sirius's shoulder or hand, spelled to perfectly blend with his surroundings.
Like I would ever compromise the integrity of a prank like that. Honestly, Remus, I'm insulted you would even ask.
Gonna know some things never change.
James wants to ask him what things have changed, but doesn't get the chance.
He going to be mad about this?
James considers it for a moment.
I don't know. He has a better sense of humour than you'd think.
Considering I don't think he has any sense of humour, I'm sure that's true.
James looks over at Remus and then straight ahead again. He still forgets sometimes how little people know about Regulus. They can already hear the music coming from the Slytherin common room, and James wonders how the hell they get away with this without a silencing charm.
Do you think Slughorn ever enforces any rules?
It's as if Remus is reading James's mind.
Or is he too busy kissing each and every one of their asses?
The entrance to the common room comes into view. He's always found the Slytherin entrance to be the most boring. Just a stretch of blank wall leading to a passage.
Ready, lads?
Sirius's voice seems to come out of nowhere. It's midnight, so they're hoping that everyone inside is already too drunk or too busy to notice anything strange, like doors opening by themselves, for example.
Hell yeah, we are.
James doesn't need to see Sirius's face to know that he's grinning.
Remember the plan. Get in, fuck this shit up, get out. Meet back at our room, got it?
It's a complicated plan, but somehow I think we'll manage to remember it.
That's what I love about you, Mooney. So bloody clever.
James is glad that Sirius can't see the way that makes Remus go stiff.
Alrighty then. John Mungan.
And then the wall opens. There are very clear differences between Gryffindor and Slytherin parties. The first being the lighting. Currently, the whole Slytherin common room is being lit only by the jellyfish someone has charmed to come to the windows, each of them glowing a different colour. James wonders if that's painful for them, if they can feel it. Can jellyfish feel things? There's just something about turning living things into inanimate objects that gives him the creeps. Slytherin also has crap taste in music. Right now they're playing something instrumental, but not classical. James doesn't recognise it, but it's making his ears bleed.
Merlin.
He tries to see his way through a crowd of people wearing unhelpfully dark clothing, in an already unhelpfully dark room.
What's the dress code for this thing? Coffin casual?
Pretty sure this is how they always dress.
James isn't really looking for Regulus. Tonight is about the Marauders. Besides, he doesn't need to get distracted. But somehow, through the chaos and darkness, he finds him. He feels it in his whole body when he sees him, a tingling sensation running along his bones. James is about ready to choke on his disparaging comments about the fashion at this party because shit. Funeral chic looks good on Reg. He's sitting in the corner, surrounded by people who seem to be talking around him more than to him, and yet he's definitely at the centre. His perfect posture has gone out the window. He slouched down in a confident, I don't give a fuck about you kind of way. Drink held lazily in his hand, black button-up undone to an obscene degree.
Fuck.
Remus looks over at him.
You okay?
What? Yeah, stubbed my toe.
Remus raises his brow before looking down at the clear ground, completely free of toe-stubbing objects.
Oh look, there are the dorm rooms.
He nudges Remus in their direction and very purposefully doesn't look back at Regulus. They stumble their way up a flight of stairs and then down a long dark hallway. doing their best to avoid the shadowy clusters of people clinging to the corners and walls. Luckily for them, the door to the 5th year dorm is open, so they don't need to worry about surprising anyone.
Merlin,
They make sure the room is empty.
is there anywhere in this place that doesn't feel like an evil lair?
Colloporters.
Remus turns to him, brow raised.
You don't think it's going to be suspicious if they come up here and find that door locked?
James shrugs.
I'd rather they be suspicious than walk right in and find us. This way we get under the cloak first and they just think the door was jammed.
That's actually pretty smart.
Always so surprised.
James steps further into the room, taking it in. Remus isn't wrong. It definitely feels like the type of place someone plotting world domination would hang out in.
Alright, let's do this and go.
Remus moves towards the beds.
This place gives me the creeps.
James smirks, doing the same. He gets through the first bed just fine, but on the second one he stalls. It wouldn't have occurred to him that it was Regulus's. There are no posters on the walls around it, no real identifying markers, except for the chest at the end. R.A.B. penned out in gold on the lid. Sirius used to have one just like it, until last year. It got left behind with everything else he owned. It's always weird, the ways in which Sirius and Regulus are so connected and so disconnected all at the same time. James runs his fingers along the initials, along the perfectly made bed, the tiny telescope on Regulus's bedside table. He smiles a little at the sight of it. Almost of its own volition, his hand wanders down to the table drawer, despite the voice in his head shouting that this is boundary-crossing territory, but there isn't much in there. Not that James was expecting there to be. A few quills, a small book on potions, rings, and... James pauses, fingers brushing against a piece of parchment shoved far to the back. Clearly not meant to be seen. Be read. And he knows. He knows that he should leave it alone. But he's never been very good at that. It's a letter, he realizes when he pulls it out. It's his letter. The page is soft, the lines of the folds well worn, clearly something that is frequently read. That thought makes James ache. It's the last one he wrote, and because of the dark, it takes him a few seconds to realize that Regulus has written comments in the margins.
Greg.
James had written, and next to it, scribbled in neat cursive, Regulus replied.
This is an indignity I do not deserve.
A little further down, James had said,
I can't decide which I like better. Us on the same team or us on opposing teams.
Opposing.
Regulus scribbled beside it.
Obviously, Potter. We're born rivals.
Most of the comments are like that. Witty. Cute. The words "our house" have been underlined and circled, though James isn't entirely sure why. But it's the note at the very bottom of the letter that catches his attention, that stands out as different from the rest. James had written,
I just want you to know that I'll be there if you need me. I'll always be there.
It looks like Regulus wrote something and then scribbled it out, but next to the blackened words there are several lines that, after reading through them twice, James realizes aren't Reg's. They're quotes.
Everything is more beautiful because we're doomed.
Starts the first one.
You will never be lovelier than you are now. We will never be here again.
And then just below it,
No man or woman born, coward or brave, can shun his destiny.
James reads them over again, the words swelling inside him, foreboding and sad. He wonders when Regulus wrote them. Hopes it was before he came back. Hopes it was when he was still stuck in Scotland, where James couldn't reach him. Because these words sound like... they sound like giving up. But he quickly shoves that thought aside. He'd been with Regulus last night, and Regulus had been... he'd been happy. He'd been having a good day. Just a few more of those, and maybe James would finally get Regulus to see that life doesn't have to be so fucking hard. That him and James can have more than secrets in the middle of the night.
Alright,
James jumps, quickly throwing the letter back in the drawer and slamming it shut.
Yeah.
He turns around, putting on a smile.
Next dorm?
Remus arches his brow and then, after a brief pause,
it'll be suspicious if his bed is the only one not charmed.
What?
but he follows Remus's gaze to Regulus's bed.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
He quickly waves his wand, casting the spell.
Stonius from Tactus. Okay, great. Should we go?
You sure you're okay?
Remus is still looking at James skeptically.
Uh-huh, never better.
James starts walking towards the door.
James,
James looks at him over his shoulder.
I think you might be forgetting something.
He nods to the cloak hanging out of James's back pocket.
Oh, right, yeah.
James holds it out and Remus steps closer to him, the pair of them disappearing.
You sure you're alright?
They unlock the door and slip back outside.
Absolutely.
The 6th year dorm is pretty uneventful, and they get through it quickly.
You think Slughorn will make them all hang over potions in the morning?
They make it to the last room. This one is way messier than the other two, as though their disorganization is beyond even house elf help.
That or Snape will. You know what a little suck-up he is.
Remus only nods as they move further into the room. Since last year, he always goes a bit stiff at the mention of Snape. The sight of him. He's afraid that Dumbledore's word won't be enough, that Snape will decide to tell people his secret anyway. The worst part is that James thinks Remus probably should be worried.
Ooh, sweet.
James pulls a full bottle of some kind of fancy liquor out of the pile of clothes beside one of the beds.
French.
He tries and fails to read the label, deciding to open it anyway.
Why is everything these wankers drink French?
I think your choice of adjective answers that question.
Once he sees what James is doing,
No, James! You can't just drink from some random bottle you found on the floor.
James only grins.
You think it's a plant? That they knew we were coming all along? Left us a poisoned bottle of whatever the fuck this is?
I think it's a bad idea to put unknown substances in your mouth.
Ooh, I love it when you talk dirty to me.
James winks as he brings the bottle to his mouth and takes a swig. The liquid is thick and syrupy and grossly sweet, but definitely alcoholic. That's all that matters in the end. James makes a face as he finishes, holding the bottle out to Remus.
Yeah, no thank you. I'm fine.
His friend eyes the bottle with distaste. James shakes it at him.
Come on. You know you want to.
I definitely don't know that. Can we just get this done?
James doesn't drop the bottle, and after several moments of a very determined staring contest, Remus surrenders.
Honestly, between you and Sirius, bloody children.
He grabs the bottle out of James's hand and takes an impressively large gulp for someone who is so against it.
Happy now?
Remus doesn't even flinch, wiping his mouth off on the back of his hand.
Wow, how did you do that?
James accepts the bottle that Remus is shoving back towards him.
Do what?
Remus starts charming the beds.
Studius Rumtactus.
Take that without even flinching.
Remus shrugs.
I'm a better drinker than you are.
What? Since when?
Remus gives him a sidelong look, moving on to the next bed.
Since always.
James narrows his eyes.
No, that can't be right. Why don't I know this?
Because usually you're too drunk to notice.
I don't get that drunk.
James isn't entirely sure how confident he feels about that statement. I mean, he certainly has gotten drunk. Once or twice. Or 3, or 5, or 20 times.
You and Sirius, Hogwarts resident bad boys, under the table after a couple beers.
Don't hold back, Mooney. Tell me how you really feel.
Remus shoots him a guilty look.
Sorry. That sounded bitter, didn't it?
Like a lemon.
James smiles.
That's sour, not... You know what? Never mind.
Remus leans against the bedpost next to him.
I don't want to be lemon.
James has to bite down on his lip to keep from laughing.
Oh, hell moons. Don't look like that. You're not a lemon. Maybe a lemon meringue.
Remus wrinkles his nose.
That's a terrible dessert.
Personally, I like meringues.
Is there anything you don't like?
James makes a face.
Beets.
Fair enough.
Remus's smile flickers and then goes out, hand coming up to scrub at his face.
Feel like I'm making everything harder on everyone.
Before James can respond, he reaches out and takes the bottle back, swallowing another gulp.
Remus, you're not making anything harder.
Please. You and Sirius are all right now. And Pete, well, he'll do whatever you do, won't he?
I don't think that's exactly...
So it's me who's stopping things from being... normal. And it's not that I don't want them to be, I do.
I know, mate.
There's a pause, Remus biting on his lower lip. He drinks again before speaking.
I'm not even angry anymore, I'm just... scared.
Remus closes his eyes for a moment and James feels his heart clench.
I'm scared of him. It hurts so much.
I know.
Remus's eyes blink open.
I can't do that again. I can't let him in and then... and that's not even touching on all the rest of it.
James arches his brow.
The rest of it.
The kissing.
Ah.
James takes the bottle back and fails, once again, not to grimace as the alcohol goes down his throat.
The kissing. He's still being a prick about that.
Remus frowns.
I don't know. I don't know what he's doing. Regulus isn't the same.
James thinks about it, tilting his head from side to side.
It's still there. The fear. I don't think he's particularly happy about being...
Gay?
Yeah,
James rubs at the back of his neck.
but I think he's kind of accepted it. Been forced to accept it. As a part of himself.
Forced?
Anger and pain cut through him and he feels his hand tighten around the bottle he's still holding.
Yeah. You get all of them?
He gestures to the beds, eager to change the subject. Remus blinks.
What? Oh,
He looks around.
yeah, I think so.
James nods.
Alright. Let's get out of here, shall we?
He takes a final swig from the bottle before tossing it on the floor. Fuck the French bastards.
Merlin, yes.
James throws the invisibility cloak back over the pair of them.
Hey, Remus.
They push out the door. He waits for his friend's stare to meet his eyes.
You're not a lemon.
Remus smiles, rolling his eyes.
Yeah, let's go already.
Things have grown slightly wilder since they went upstairs. People are getting sloppy, no longer able to maintain their cool out of facades. There's a lot of closely pressed dancers and spilling and shouting over the still terrible music. There are also a lot fewer paths through the crowd. Remus and James do their best to stay out of people's way, but it's near impossible at this point.
Christ, the whole bloody school's here.
Certainly seems like it.
Remus pushes James to the side so that they miss the swinging arm of a girl emphatically pointing at something across the room.
Oh, shit.
She yanks on a friend's arm.
Look.
James doesn't really pay the girl any attention, too busy looking for the next opening in the crowd. At least, he doesn't until approximately 3 seconds later.
Oh, Christ.
James looks over at him, finding his friend's gaze directed across the room, in the direction the girl had been pointing.
What's up?
James.
But it's too late, because James is already looking. It's slightly pathetic that the first thing he feels is still butterflies. That jolt of dopamine that he always gets when he looks at Regulus. It takes his brain a moment to catch up to what he's actually looking at.
James.
Remus tugs lightly on his sleeve, like he's trying to pull him away, to get him to stop staring. But he can't. Can't move. Can't look away.
What?
Everything suddenly feels like it's moving very slowly, like he's in a dream. A dream where he's watching Regulus kiss some girl, which isn't right. Why would he do that? Except it's not just a kiss, because they're still going. Regulus's hand on the back of her head, the other on her lower back.
Fuck.
It all speeds up again, as it really sinks in. A sharp pain nearly cuts him in half, causing him to double over and grab hold of his knees. He feels dizzy.
Oh, I think I might be sick.
James tries to remind himself that there's nothing actually physically wrong with him. He's fine. He's fine. He's totally fine.
Come on, James. Come on, let's go.
Remus wraps his arm around him, pulling him up and forward, and James lets him. Somehow they make it into the corridor outside, and James knows that he should wait, that they need to get further away from the common room before they can become visible again. But he can't breathe. He pulls away from Remus and away from the cloak, barely making it around the corner before he needs to stop and grab onto something for support. He presses his palms into the cold stone of the dungeon and hangs his head. It's not long before Remus catches up to him. He doesn't say anything, just leans on the wall next to him.
I didn't see that coming.
Which is probably the most obvious statement he's ever made.
No, me neither. He's probably drunk.
And James has to grit his teeth against the pathetic noise that wants to come out of his mouth. He was drunk the first time he kissed me that's sitting on his tongue.
It looked like he meant it.
It looked like he was snogging some girl at a party. Don't read more into it, James. Not until you talk to him.
You don't want me to be with him.
It's not a question, but Remus still answers.
No.
So why are you being so fair?
Because what I really want is for you to be happy, and despite all reason and good judgment, he makes you happy. I've seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, he does.
But just so we're clear,
James opens his eyes just in time to see Remus's expression go from sympathetic to murderous in one blink.
any good faith he had managed to build with me is now gone. And the next time I see that scrawny little twerp, I'm going to ruin his fucking life.
James runs a hand over his face, feeling shaky and sweaty and all other kinds of awful.
He's not really scrawny.
Remus rolls his eyes.
Can't believe that's what you got from that.
James smiles weakly, leaning his head back against the wall.
Fuck. Should have had more of that posh alcohol. I'm too sober for this.
We have alcohol back at the dorm. Speaking of, we should get going before the other two think a rescue mission is in order.
James pulls himself off the wall. He looks back in the direction of the Slytherin common room, feeling something tug on him, like a string attached to his belly button, pulling him backwards, back to Reg. As he just wants to see him, to touch him, to remember that he's his person.
Oh, fuck.
You're going to have to stop saying that or Sirius is going to ask questions.
Sorry, I just really didn't. I don't know what to do with that.
You'll talk to him. You'll figure it out one way or the other. I know how much... I know how much that hurts.
James looks at him and realizes suddenly how true that is. How many times Remus has had to stand by and watch Sirius snog some girl.
Come on. We gotta go before the sneezing starts.
Sirius is wired when they get back to the dorm, which makes sense. First prank of the year, they got all the senior Slytherins, ruined their big night. All in all, a major success. He should celebrate. Normally, James would be right there with him, but instead he feels numb, disconnected from all of it.
Okay, what's going on with you?
James blinks. Sirius is staring straight at him, Peter sitting on the bed next to him since his own is still out of commission.
Sorry,
James drags a hand through his hair and offers up a sheepish smile.
just tired.
Tired?
It's like he's never heard the word before.
You're...
I am too, honestly.
James silently thanks Remus. He watches Sirius's eyes bounce between the pair of them, the surprise slowly morphing into disappointment. And James hates it. Hates that this is the first time they've really felt like the Marauders, like a team, in ages. And he's ruining it.
Okay, sure. Guess we'll call it a night then.
Hey,
James knocks Sirius's foot with his own.
tomorrow, okay? We'll celebrate tomorrow, after we see all their miserable faces at breakfast.
That brings some semblance of joy back to Sirius's expression.
God, it's going to be brilliant.
James gives him a tight smile before pulling himself fully onto his bed and shutting the curtains. He doesn't bother to get undressed.
You know, Pete, I have to say, I thought you were going to chicken out on this one, but no, you actually handled it pretty well. Also, I must ask, did being in the Slytherin dormitories help your fascination with that Salazar Slytherin bloke?
How many times do I have to say it? I don't have a fetish for a creepy old snake man.
It seemed like you might harbour some genuine feelings for this man.
Okay, if I have a fetish for Salazar Slytherin, then you have a fetish for Bowie, whatever the fuck his name is.
Absolutely I do. And I own that with pride.
Nox.
James lays there on his back, staring up at the canopy over his head. Somehow thinking and not thinking at the same time. He feels like he has too much energy, like it's pressing against his skin. Pushing, pushing, pushing. He can't shut his mind off. Every time he closes his eyes, he's back in that room and he's staring at Regulus, and Regulus is holding that girl. Holding her like he means it. And she's touching him. James's skin feels too hot. Don't read more into it, that's what Remus said. Except Remus doesn't know Regulus. He thinks he's like Sirius, but he isn't. He isn't, and so James just can't make sense of it. He demands answers from his brain, but it just sparks and fizzes and restarts. His skin feels too hot. His ribs feel too tight. He tries to remember what the girl looked like. Tries to figure out if he knows her, if he's seen Regulus with her before. Scours his head for any memory of Regulus mentioning her, but nothing in his brain is working right. Every thought he has is interrupted by that image of Regulus snogging someone else. His skin feels too hot. His ribs feel too tight. His head feels too loud.
Fuck this.
James rips the curtains of his bed back and gets to his feet. He slips on his trainers, grabbing the invisibility cloak from the chair he tossed it onto, heading for the door.
James, don't.
He looks up to see Remus getting out of bed.
I can't do this. I can't just sit here. I need to know what the fuck's going on.
Wait until tomorrow.
I can't.
What are you going to do, James? Just storm in there and kidnap him?
I don't know.
He really doesn't. He has no plan whatsoever. He just needs to do something. He just needs to see Regulus, to have him explain.
This isn't just regular stupid. You do realize that, right? I mean, just wandering in there on any given night would be an incredibly stupid thing to do. But after we just fucked with them, if they find you, they'll tear you apart.
James is unmoved.
I can handle a few angry Slytherins.
Can he?
That question manages to pull James up short. He opens and closes his mouth, willing an answer to come. But before any does, Sirius and Peter are blinking up at them.
What the hell?
Peter rubs his sleep-heavy eyes.
I thought you two were tired.
Sirius doesn't look angry, necessarily, just confused. His eyes bounce between Remus and James before they land on the invisibility cloak in James's hand.
Ah. Go and see the boy.
The boy? What boy? Who's the boy?
Remus looks at both of them and then, apparently deciding that that's too much of a mess to sort out right now, turns his attention back to James.
I get it, okay? I do. But this is not the right way to do this. The right time.
I'm going fucking insane here, Moons.
Mooney, let him go have his fun. What's the big deal?
Remus isn't looking at Sirius.
It's not that simple.
I'm sorry. I'm still confused. Who is this boy?
Peter looks around at all of them.
Now that, Petey, is the 1,000-galleon question.
Sirius taps the side of his nose. James just shakes his head, too tired to take in the ridiculousness of his current situation.
Okay, I'm going.
No! James, I swear to Merlin, you can be such a fucking bullheaded idiot sometimes.
Remus grabs hold of his wrist and yanks him back into the room.
Remus, let go.
You're going to get yourself hurt. You're going to get both of you hurt.
Remus, mate, you're being a little much, yeah? They've been doing this for a year now. I think they've got it figured out.
Who's been doing what for a year?
Will you please shut up? You literally have no idea what you're talking about.
Which, surprisingly, does shut Sirius up at least for a second.
Wait. Hold on. Do you know?
Remus instantly stiffens and James can feel his stomach start to roll, bile crawling up the back of his throat.
You do, don't you? You know who he is.
James sees the second light bulb go off in Sirius's head. He's too clever by half, really. Always has been. This time he turns to James.
Is he in Slytherin?
Is who in? The boy? Is the boy in Slytherin?
But James doesn't stick around for the onslaught of questions. Somewhere in the midst of the drama, Remus lets his grip slip and James takes full advantage, pushing himself through the door, down the stairs and back into the castle.
Why would he tell you and not me?
I'm not getting into this with you, Sirius. It's not any of my business.
Well, it must be your business, since you know who he is.
It doesn't matter how I know. That's not the point. Just leave it. I'm going to bed.
Will somebody tell me what the fuck is going on?
James has no idea what time it is at this point. 3 in the morning? 4? Somewhere around there. The Slytherin common room has significantly calmed down. There are maybe a dozen people still around, half of whom are passed out, the other half are lying on top of one another. Luckily, he doesn't see Regulus. He can hear the fruits of their labour already. Under different circumstances, he would be soaking up every minute of it.
Maybe we should give them Pepper up?
James hears as he pushes up the stairs. People are going in and out of each other's rooms, confused and trying to figure out if anyone has found the counter-charm. Sirius would be so proud. He slips into Regulus's dorm just as some other Slytherin he doesn't recognise walks out.
Motherfucking bollocks. I was going to get late tonight.
Rosier kicks the leg of his bed, which is apparently enough to set off the charm because the mattress lifts up.
Oh, really? Really? Salazar's balls. How did they even get in here?
James walks a little further into the room and sees that Rosier is talking to Regulus. Regulus is sitting on the floor, back pressed to the wall, arms resting on his knees. James's traitorous heart leaps.
What makes you so sure it wasn't one of the younger years?
Are you kidding me? You think one of those brats could pull this off? But they would dare. No, this has butter in your brother written all over it, and I swear the next time I see them, I'm going to permanently separate them from their bollocks.
Regulus doesn't really react to this, expression blank as he stares back at Rosier. Crouch comes into the room and James is grateful that he's moved far enough away from the door to avoid a collision.
Well?
Crouch shakes his head.
Nah, 70s haven't got a clue.
What the fuck?
He kicks his bed again. Rosier points his wing at it.
Novus Sternius.
But nothing happens.
Come on, you stupid piece of shit. Novus Sternius. Novus Sternius. Novus Sternius.
Heaven, give it a rest.
Rosier rounds on him.
You know, Reg, you're being incredibly unhelpful right now.
Am I?
Which causes Rosier's eyes to narrow.
You're supposed to be the clever one. What's the bloody counter charm?
Regulus drops his head back against the wall and looks up at the ceiling when he talks.
It's a mutation of the spell.
What?
It's only then that James realizes that Crouch is swaying on the spot, eyes glassy, clearly the drunkest of the three.
They've adapted the original spell, which means that there isn't a known counter charm to exist. We'd have to figure one out, which we could do after a few hours of reading up on the etymology of the Sternius charm, though, of course, by that point the charm will likely have worn off by itself anyway, and Evan still won't have been able to shag Louise.
Fucking fuckity fuck. I'm good to kill them.
Crouch, on the other hand, seems significantly more accepting of the situation. Likely, James imagines, due to the alcohol. He's able to snag the blanket and pillow off his bed, though it does set it off in the process. He throws them down on the floor and gets comfortable. Rosier, on the other hand, has started pacing, running his hands furiously through his hair.
You know what? No. Fuck this hassles. I'm going to find Louise. How the bloody hell did they even get in here?
James isn't sure if he's really asking anymore, but apparently Regulus decides that he isn't because he doesn't say anything, which, watching passively as his friend storms out of the room. Regulus leans his head back against the wall again and closes his eyes. James figures it's now or never, so he walks forward, sitting himself beside Regulus but keeping the cloak on. He has no idea when Rosier, or anyone else for that matter, is going to come storming back in here.
Good party.
Regulus jolts upright, eyes flying open as he looks around.
Certainly looked like you were having fun.
James brings Regulus's gaze towards him, though it lands somewhere off his left shoulder rather than his face.
What the hell are you doing here?
His eyes go to Crouch's sleeping body and then the door. James doesn't see any point in beating around the bush.
You were kissing someone.
Regulus blinks, eyes coming back to James's shoulder.
What?
You were snogging some bird.
Regulus continues to stare at him, a plethora of expressions flicking across his face so quickly James loses track. Then, Regulus reaches forward, managing to grab hold of the front of James's shirt and yanks them both to their feet.
What are you...
Shut up!
He drags James towards the bathroom and throws him inside and then follows after. Regulus shuts the door behind them, pulling out his wand.
Colloportus.
Then he turns back to James.
Take it off. I'm not talking to the fucking air.
James does as he asks, pulling the cloak off and tossing it on the counter. Despite the anger in his eyes, it feels good to have Regulus finally looking at him, after a whole night of not being seen.
What the hell are you doing here, James?
I told you. Who was she?
Regulus shakes his head.
I don't know. Some fourth year.
Oh, some fourth year. Great. That's great.
I don't understand what you're so upset about.
James isn't sure why that feels as shitty as it does. Why it makes something in his stomach lurch.
You can't understand why I'm upset.
Regulus continues to stare back at him with a blank expression. James runs a hand through his hair.
Last year I spoke to Lily at breakfast and you freaked out on me.
Regulus's gaze sharpens.
I didn't freak out.
Bullshit.
I didn't freak out. And that's not even remotely the same.
Oh, believe me, I know it's not. For starters, I didn't have my fucking mouth attached to her face.
Ugh, you're being childish.
For a second, James sees red.
Sorry, I'm being what?
He has to grab hold of the counter to stop himself from punching something, doing his best to breathe through the anger.
James, I'm not... hate this conversation.
The feeling is mutual.
James isn't looking at him. Can't right now without wanting to commit acts of violence, so instead he focuses on his knuckles.
Look, I'm not interested in girls. At all. Ever. All right?
You certainly looked interested.
Yes, well, that's rather the point, isn't it?
James finally turns to him.
What?
Regulus rolls his eyes, which really does nothing for James's anger.
Well, if I was never seen kissing anyone, people would start to get suspicious, wouldn't they?
James tries to take that in.
So it's a performance?
Obviously.
No, Reg, fuck you and you're obviously right now. It wasn't obvious to me.
Yes. I can see that. In my defense, I didn't know you were watching.
So that makes it okay?
Regulus doesn't look like he knows how to answer that. James does not want to ask his next question, but finds the words in his mouth anyway.
This something you do often?
Regulus gives him a flat look.
It's something I do occasionally.
Since we've been together?
Like I said. Occasionally.
He's so good, James can't help but think, at making it sound like things don't matter.
Fuck, Reg.
James shakes his head, turning away again, facing the back wall, trying to figure out what to do with whatever this feeling is, the one currently gnawing on his ribs. A long moment of silence passes.
I understand what you're saying. It's cover, to keep people from gossiping, I get it.
I'm sensing a but.
He doesn't know how to say this, how to make it make sense to Regulus, to himself.
But it hurts.
Which is the only way he can describe how it felt to watch Regulus with that girl.
Fuck, it hurts. Real or fake.
There's another pause, and then James hears Regulus move, feels his arms slip around his waist, pulling him back into Regulus's chest, and he lets him. Lets Regulus hook his chin over his shoulder and holds him close. He so rarely does. It's always the other way around. They stay like that for a few seconds, pressed together.
I'm sorry. I didn't consider that it might affect you.
No, of course you didn't.
Regulus's grip on him tightens.
I'm sorry.
James melts further into him. He's not used to being held this way. He likes it. Some nagging voice somewhere inside him tells him that he shouldn't. Weak, it says. But James pushes it aside because he's too tired. Because Regulus's warmth is untying some of the knots that have found their way into his stomach.
I don't want to hurt you, James.
James can feel his breath on his neck.
I know I have. I know I will. I need you to know. Whatever happens. I never wanted to.
James finds himself reminded of the words Regulus wrote at the bottom of his letter.
Everything is more beautiful because we're doomed.
James holds Regulus's arms more tightly against himself.
Nothing's going to happen, Reg.
James.
I don't care. Hurt me. I can take it.
James.
James turns his head to look at him, their eyes meeting over his shoulder, noses practically touching. He can see the sadness in Regulus's eyes and he wants to wipe it away. We're not doomed, he wants to tell him. I won't let us be. And then they're kissing, desperate and messy, like each of them has a point to prove. Eventually James turns around in Regulus's arms, crowding him backwards until he's sliding onto the counter, James between his thighs.
This shirt.
James is running his hands up Regulus's sides.
You have a problem with my shirt?
James makes his way under Regulus's jaw, behind his ear, to the sensitive patch of skin he knows Regulus likes, a shiver instantly running through the younger boy.
It's been driving me crazy.
I'll have to wear it more often then.
Ugh, Merlin, don't. I'll die.
And then he's back at Regulus's mouth, deepening the kiss, hands coming to either side of Regulus's face. He wants to kiss away every trace of that girl. He wants to be the only taste in Regulus's mouth. They break apart.
Reg! What the fuck? Did you lock the door? What the hell are you doing in there?
Regulus is leaning forward and resting his forehead against James's shoulder.
Guess Evan is back.
Have I ever told you how much I hate your friends?
He pulls himself upright again.
Come on, you should probably get out of here.
James leans forward to kiss Reg one more time, not quite pulling back all the way.
No more girls.
Eventually, Regulus nods.
No more girls.
Regulus, I swear, if you're dead in there, I'm going to kill you again.
Regulus rolls his eyes, sliding off the counter and looking in the mirror, straightening out his hair and shirt.
You look good.
Regulus sends him a sidelong look.
I look like someone was just snogging me senseless on the counter.
James beams.
Same thing.
Regulus is unable to hide his smile as he turns towards the door.
Ready?
James slips the cloak over his head.
I'll find some excuse to leave the room. Open the door for you.
Regulus goes on, pulling out his wand so he can take down the spells.
Wow, what a gentleman.
Speaking of gentlemen, any chance I could get the counter charm for the beds?
James smiles even though Regulus can't see him.
Don't have one.
Of course you don't. Aloha Mora.
15 minutes later, James walks into the Gryffindor common room, invisibility cloak in hand, and stops dead in his tracks at the sight of Sirius on the sofa, waiting. Fuck.
Look, can we do this later?
Sirius, of course, ignores him.
I've been sitting here trying to come up with a single Slytherin bloke who isn't a complete piece of shit. And I have to tell you, James, I'm drawing a blank.
James leans against one of the chairs.
I never said he wasn't Slytherin.
Please, let's not.
Sirius.
Who is it, James?
I told you, I can't say.
Remus knows.
Remus figured it out.
So what? What's the difference?
The difference is I didn't have to break a promise.
Sirius bounces his right knee up and down, body vibrating with anger.
Your promise to some Death Eater wannabe.
Don't start, Sirius.
You know, I expect most people to be full of shit. Everyone is principled until they have to sacrifice something. Until they have to put in the effort. Then all those morals seem to just disappear. But you, I believed in you.
Those words hit him so hard, James actually staggers back.
And to think,
Sirius isn't done yet, smiling in a way that sends chills down James's spine.
you were so fucking righteous last year when I messed up.
That's a bullshit comparison and you know it.
Is it? How many people do you reckon your boy's gonna hurt, huh? How many has he already?
He's not a Death Eater.
Sure, maybe he doesn't have the uniform yet. But he is, isn't he? In here.
I'm gonna get him out, Sirius. I'm gonna show him it doesn't have to be like that.
For the first time since he walked into the common room, James sees something other than anger in Sirius's eyes.
You really believe that?
Yes.
He does. Deep in his bones. Right down to his core.
You can't save people, James. You can show them the way out, but they have to walk through those doors themselves. Don't you think I've tried?
No. Not like me. You never loved him like I do. And James knows that it's such an unfair thing to think. But he does anyway. Clings to it. He'll follow me. He trusts me. I'll show him that all love doesn't have teeth. That all families don't make you bleed. James can't give Sirius an answer, bringing his hands up to his face, scrubbing at his eyes.
I know that you can't see it. But this? What you're doing? It's the wrong thing.
You can't know that.
Sure I can.
Sirius looks like he has more to say, but for once in his life holds his tongue, giving James a once-over before shaking his head and turning towards the stairs.
He's different. It's not really him, the person everyone else sees. There's so much good in him, Sirius, I swear.
Sirius stops on the first step, taking his time, turning around. When he does, all James sees is pity. It makes him flinch.
And how long is that going to be enough? Huh, James? Until he gets the mark? Until he kills someone? Or do you reckon you'll be able to make yourself believe that that's okay too? That's not who he really is?
Sirius.
Thing is, it's not a hypothetical for me. I've sat at their table. I've felt their teeth in my neck. There's no fucking grey area here, okay? The things you have to do. To get by, to blend in. Do you think if it had been easy, I wouldn't have done it?
James finds himself unconsciously taking a step forward, reaching out to his best mate. Sirius shakes himself, like pulling himself out of a nightmare, his eyes finding James.
They're my family. I loved them. The awful truth is that sometimes I still do. And if I could have made myself fit without crossing any lines, I would have. But it's not possible. You can't be one of them and keep your hands clean. So if he's friends with them, if he's accepted by them, by that world, you can bet he's doing some fucked up shit when you're not looking.
James shakes his head but doesn't speak. Can't. Doesn't even know where to start. He expects Sirius to turn around and leave, but he doesn't. And after a few more moments of silence, he walks back down the stairs, stopping in front of James.
I love him.
Because he has nothing else. Because it's the one thing that he knows without a doubt to be true.
It's so strong and so much. And I hope you're wrong. I need you to be wrong because I can't.
Merlin, James.
He pulls him into a hug and James goes willingly, sagging against his best friend.
You really have terrible taste in men.
I don't know. I did alright with you lot.
Yeah, you did alright with us.
James doesn't know whose heart hurts more, his or Sirius's.
Marlene thinks you're cute.
Remus blinks down at his coursework and then up at Mary MacDonald, who has just dropped into the seat across from him at the library. The library he'd come to specifically to get away from people, choosing a table at the back, hidden by bookshelves and almost always empty.
Hey, hello? Earth to Remus, do you hear me?
I heard you. I was just hoping you'd go away.
Mary sticks her tongue out at him.
Tough luck, Buttercup. So?
Mary waves her hand impatiently.
So, what do you think about Marlene calling you cute?
That's nice of her.
Though honestly, Remus isn't sure cute is exactly the look he's going for. Cute is for puppies. Or babies. Not whatever he is. Boy, man, person, werewolf.
Nice of her.
Mary's clearly offended on Marlene's behalf. Remus brings his hand up to his head, massaging his temples.
What exactly do you want from me, Mary?
She leans forward, dark braids slipping over her shoulder.
I want to know what you're going to do about it.
Remus blinks.
Do about it?
If I were you, I'd ask her to Hogsmeade this weekend.
It takes Remus's brain a moment to catch up, to understand the connection between being called cute and asking someone to go to Hogsmeade with you.
Like, on a date?
He hates everything about that idea. The eye roll Mary gives him is truly spectacular.
Yes, Merlin, I thought you were the clever one.
Common misconception.
It is true. People think James and Sirius are idiots because they act like it, but that's a choice on their part. Even Peter is smarter than most people give him credit for. He just isn't good at school. He can learn anything if you explain it to him out loud, even if it's only once. And he picks up spells just by watching. It's books he struggles with.
So we're agreed then? You should take her to the Three Broomsticks.
Bit obvious that. Where else do you take someone in Hogsmeade?
Remus has no idea why he's playing along with this. There's no way he's taking Marlene anywhere.
Well, you were a little slow on the uptake, so I'm not sure what's obvious to you, and I don't want you to do something stupid like bring her to Madame Puddifoot's.
Remus makes a face even just thinking about that place. Pink and frilly and blasting sickly sweet smells into the street that give him a migraine every time he walks by.
Yes, exactly. Good to know you have some taste. That bodes well for this.
Bodes well for... Listen, Mary.
He doesn't know how to finish that sentence, though. He considers telling her the truth, but what would that even look like? Hey, Mary, I'm not going to go out with Marlene. I don't fancy her. I'm in love with my psychotic best friend, or ex-best friend, depending on how you look at it, who's too afraid to admit that he wants to kiss me, let alone anything else. My love life is really complicated enough as it is. Also, I'm a werewolf. Would that be too much?
Remus, Merlin, what is with you today?
Remus blinks, coming back to the present as Mary impatiently taps her nails on the table between them.
Sorry. Look, I like Marlene a lot.
Great!
Remus does his best not to cringe.
Yeah, great. But I'm not
His next words drop out of his mouth as Regulus Black walks into view, which in and of itself would have been annoying enough, but is even more annoying because Regulus is with someone. A female someone.
That little prick.
Wow, what?
Remus turns back to Mary, realizing what he's just done.
Oh, no, sorry. I wasn't. It was.
Really not into finishing your sentences today, are you?
Mary looks, to Remus's relief, much more amused than angry.
I suppose it does give you a bit of a mysterious vibe. Marlene might be into that.
Remus can't tell if she's joking or not.
Remus!
To his horror, Remus realizes that the girl Regulus is with, who he can now see, is Cersei Greengrass. And she's coming towards them. Mary tilts her head.
Wow, she's adorable.
Remus doesn't find that statement to be particularly helpful, especially considering that Cersei's currently in the stacks with the boy who's meant to be seeing his best mate. And the only reason people come to the stacks is to snog. Well, people who aren't Remus anyway.
Friend of yours?
No.
He doesn't even know why he says it. He likes Cersei well enough. She's very energetic.
Well, maybe you should tell her that, because she's coming over here. Bloody hell, is that Regulus Black? Weird couple.
They're not a couple.
Remus isn't entirely sure that's true.
Hi, Remus.
Cersei beams as she stops in front of their table, a very reluctant Regulus trailing behind her. He looks as happy about this situation as Remus is.
Hey, Cersei. Oh, this is my friend Mary.
I know who she is. Mary MacDonald, Gryffindor chaser, scoring average of 80 points per game and owner of exceptionally fashionable shoes.
Oh, I like you.
Mary then turns unnecessarily to Remus.
I like her.
I heard.
Remus was busy glaring at Regulus, whose expression is infuriatingly blank.
We were just going to study. Reg is helping me with potions. I'm absolutely useless at it.
Ah, I have fond memories of studying back here. Actually, I did a lot of that with your brother.
Mary sends Regulus a meaningful look, but the younger boy's expression doesn't shift. He just stares back blankly.
You guys study together a lot?
Regulus meets Remus's eye.
No.
I don't know. We get together at least twice a week. That's pretty often. Who do you study with more than twice a week?
Cersei looks back at Regulus with curiosity.
Yes, do tell, Regulus.
Mary leans forward across the table, hungry for gossip.
Who are you studying with more than twice a week?
Remus grits his teeth and resists the urge to hex someone.
No one.
Ah, a one-girl kind of guy, huh?
He's going to kill this kid. He never deserved James in the first place, but this? It's way over the line. All I can think about is the look on James's face at that party.
I mean, we're partners, so makes sense that we hang out together more.
Cersei smiles, elbowing Regulus playfully.
I'm sorry, you're what?
Regulus, being the absolute wanker that he is, has the audacity to roll his eyes.
She means we're prefect partners.
Prefect partners?
Mary turns to Remus.
Is that a thing?
No.
Remus doesn't stop glaring at Regulus.
That is definitely not a thing.
I kind of made it a thing.
Wow. Okay, this is almost too adorable.
Remus violently disagrees. He feels his hands shaking with the desire to strangle Regulus.
I have to go.
Remus stands up abruptly, spelling his stuff into his bag.
Oh, sorry. Did we interrupt or...?
Honestly, you've made this trip to the library far more entertaining for me, so I don't know what his problem is.
Remus throws his book bag over his shoulder and turns to Regulus.
You're unbelievable.
The younger boy doesn't even flinch.
You're willfully misunderstanding.
Remus shakes his head, turning around, fully intending to walk out of the library and leave it at that. Unfortunately, he spent far too much time with Sirius Black to be the bigger person. He points his wand over his shoulder,
Locomotive
giving the satisfaction of watching Regulus's unflappable expression crack open in surprise as his legs give out underneath him.
Remus, holy shit.
Remus walks away, leaving Mary in the library.
Wow, I've never seen a Jellylegs Jinx in real life before. That was brilliant.
He probably shouldn't have done that. He's a prefect, as McGonagall reminds him several times after calling him into her office, taking 24 house points from Gryffindor, and giving him detention. Unfortunately, not on the weekend, so he's still going to have to figure out what to do about the Mary/Marlene situation. Maybe fake an illness? He's sick often enough. He can't imagine anyone would question it. By the time McGonagall's done dressing him down, he has a headache and he's tired and grumpy and just wants to sit quietly in a dark room and nap until supper. Which, really, he ought to have known was never going to happen, but he bravely forgot who his friends are.
Remus John Lupin.
He's barely in the door before Sirius is throwing himself at his feet, literally, bowing to him like he's some kind of god.
You are my hero.
Remus rolls his eyes, walking very purposely around Sirius towards his bed.
You've talked to Mary, then?
He makes brief eye contact with James, who's sitting at the end of his own bed, an expression on his face that Remus can't read.
Pretty sure half the school is talk to Mary at this point.
Remus drops his bag, collapsing onto his bed.
Brilliant.
I mean, Jellylegs Jinx? In the middle of the library? Merlin the balls, I can't.
Remus very staunchly refuses to care that Sirius is impressed, even if the little second year inside of him is loving the idea that Sirius Black thinks he did something ballsy.
Tell me.
Sirius collapses onto the bed next to him, propped up on his elbows so that he's hovering over Remus. Sirius has never had any concept of personal space.
What did he do? Did he squeal? Like a little girl?
These days, Sirius has taken to trying to pretend that the tension between them doesn't exist. Remus can't tell if it makes him feel angry or sad or guilty, because he knows that Sirius is trying to make things better, and Remus isn't letting him. Can't let him.
Shockingly, I didn't do it for your amusement.
Why did you do it? I mean, he must have really pissed you off to make you ex him.
Remus looks briefly at James again and then away.
He was being a prick.
Ah, well, that's kind of Regulus's default setting, isn't it?
Remus swipes a hand across his face.
Is he okay?
He's fine. Ego probably knocked down a few pegs, though.
Remus makes the mistake of looking at Sirius then. Sirius, who was much too close to him, with bright eyes and a pretty mouth. Sometimes Remus doesn't know how he's managed this for so long. Sirius always being so close, always touching him and whispering into his ear, lying on his bed. Ever since last year, ever since the kiss, being around Sirius feels like some strange form of torture. It makes Remus burn from the inside out. Remus pulls himself up, reaching for his bag. At least coursework will give him something else to focus on.
What'd McGonagall give you?
Remus looks up from his books. It's the first time James has said anything since Remus walked into the room. He doesn't find anger in James's eyes, but then he wasn't expecting to. Just disappointment. He wonders if Mary mentioned Cersei Greengrass in her retelling of the story.
Moony?
Remus blinks as Sirius waves his hand in his face, startling him out of his thoughts.
Sorry.
Remus shakes his head.
Been doing that a lot today. Detention, and I lost 20 points.
20?!
Oh, worth it. Oh, hey Moony, does this mean you're missing Hogsmeade this weekend?
Remus shakes his head, pulling out his Charms textbook.
Nope.
Great. I was worried I was going to have to be all on my own.
That makes Remus look up.
What do you mean?
Sirius rolls his eyes.
Well, Wormtail has gone and gotten himself a date with some Hufflepuff.
Rebecca! I've told you her name like 10 times.
Yeah.
Sirius waves his hand dismissively.
I can't be expected to remember the name of every fair damsel.
It's literally one name.
Anyway, Peter is abandoning us for Rachel. And Jamie here is also going to be occupied, apparently.
James rolls his eyes.
Look, I already told you I'm sorry. It's only this one time, okay?
So you see, Moons, it'll be just you and I.
Sirius smiles at Remus then, a little nervously, and Remus feels his pulse speed up. Him and Sirius, hanging out all day, alone, in Hogsmeade. There was a time when that would have sounded like a dream come true to him, when he wanted nothing more than to have Sirius's undivided attention. Now he can't think of anything worse. It's too much. Too much like something he can't have.
Actually, I'm going with Marlene.
You're going with Marlene?
Like on a date?
And despite the fact that this whole thing is completely ridiculous and just Mary sticking her nose where it doesn't belong because she's... Remus doesn't know. Bored? He actually finds himself a little annoyed at their surprise.
I can go on dates.
Remus flips aimlessly through his textbook just to have something to do with his hands. He can see Sirius out of the corner of his eye, sitting stock still, his face drained of all expression. It reminds him eerily of Regulus.
Yeah, of course you can, mate.
Remus can see him looking at Sirius too, concern creasing his brow. Which is completely unfair, because if this is anybody's fault, it's Sirius's, with his, I don't knows, and I can't handle this's. What, is Remus just supposed to sit around and never fancy anyone again? Suddenly, Sirius pulls himself off of Remus's bed, not looking at him.
I'm going to go take a shower.
Padfoot?
Sirius ignores James, slamming the bathroom door behind him.
Oh, what was that about?
Remus shakes his head, looking back down at the book in his hands and feeling his anger and sadness and guilt all twisting around one another.
No idea.
Remus isn't able to track Marlene down until later the next day when they're coming back from Transfiguration and he spots her alone in the common room.
Hey, I'll catch up with you guys later, okay?
He's already starting to pull away. James pauses, looking like he's about to ask why when his eyes find Marlene.
Sure, yeah. Okay, Moons.
Sirius doesn't look at him, doesn't speak. Hasn't all day. Good, Remus thinks bitterly, stalking his way across the common room. Now you know how it feels.
Hey, Ma, can I talk to you for a sec?
He stands awkwardly in front of her as his friends disappear up the stairs. She looks up from the book on her lap and smiles.
Merlin, please. Anything so I can stop reading about allergy potions.
Remus smiles weakly as he sits down next to her, palms already sweaty. He's not exactly sure the best way to approach this. He doesn't want to lead Marlene on, but he also doesn't want to give Sirius the satisfaction of knowing he lied.
Okay, so I was wondering if you'd want to go to Hogsmeade with me as a friend?
She arches her brow and Remus can tell she's holding back a smirk.
You're asking me out as a friend?
He grimaces.
Yeah, and also maybe don't mention the friend bit to anyone else, like Mary. Or Sirius.
Marlene makes an O shape with her mouth and Remus is glad that she seems to have understood something because he is not at all confident that anything he just said made sense.
Mary put you up to this?
A bit, but then also...
Also?
His eyes go to the stairs.
James and Peter are busy and I just can't... I can't be alone with Sirius. We're...
He shakes his head, mouth helplessly opening and closing, begging Marlene to understand.
Merlin, Remus, I will happily go on a fake date with you, if it'll get you to stop looking at me with your sad, lost puppy dog eyes. Besides, it'll help me with Mary anyway.
He sags back against the sofa.
Oh, thank Merlin. Why is she so interested in finding you a date anyway?
Marlene rolls her eyes.
I don't know. She thinks I'm stunted, or lonely, or something.
Oh. Are you?
Godric. Rude much?
Sorry, I didn't mean it to be... I'm a bit stunted and lonely myself, to be honest with you.
Marlene's smile takes on a slightly new aspect, softer than it was before.
Well, all right then. If we're being honest, I am a bit lonely and a bit stunted. But not in the ways she thinks. At least, not exactly.
Remus stares at her for a minute before shaking his head.
I don't follow.
Marlene doesn't look surprised by this.
Sometimes the people we're closest to are the hardest people to be honest with. Because it feels like we're pulling the rug out from under them if we turn out to be something other than what they thought. Does that make sense?
Remus takes his time, trying to figure out the look in Marlene's eyes. He knows that she's saying more than the words coming out of her mouth. He's just not entirely sure if it's what he thinks it is.
Yes, you're lonely and stunted because you're pretending to be the person you think she thinks you are?
Bit of a tongue twister, huh?
Remus smiles dryly, running a hand through his hair.
What if she actually knows you better than you think?
Ah, well.
She walks her fingers along the spine of her book.
That's the problem, isn't it? We're all secretly hoping that the people we love really know us. So, I guess I'm protecting myself as much as her. Because I'm not sure that I'm brave enough to find out that she doesn't.
Remus remembers how it had felt the first time he realised that James knew he fancied Sirius. Remembers the fear that he would lose him, that this person he had allowed himself to get attached to would never look at him the same again. Would suddenly see him as a stranger.
I think she'll surprise you, Mary.
Marlene looks up from her book, smiling sadly.
I hope so.
It's chilly out these days, the trees all changing colours, the summer completely evaporated. Remus listens to Marlene talk about Quidditch on their way down to Hogsmeade. He's picked up enough from James and Sirius over the years that he can contribute here and there. Besides, it's fun to hear about James's captaincy from someone other than James himself.
He's really good with younger kids.
They get a table at the Three Broomsticks.
I mean, I know James. I know he's not as much of a tosser as he seems.
That's debatable.
She smirks at Remus before continuing.
The way he is on the pitch, though, you'd think he'd have no patience for teaching, but...
She shakes her head, taking a sip of her butterbeer.
He's brilliant at it.
Remus smiles, hands closing around his own drink.
Fun fact. James Potter's an excellent teacher. I would have failed potions if it hadn't been for him.
Really?
He nods.
Yeah, but don't tell Lily. She thinks it was her.
Marlene mimes sealing her lips.
Your secret is safe with me.
Thank you.
Remus dips his head in a mocking bow.
It's all those boiling points and cutting techniques and measurements.
Remus shivers at the thought.
I've always been shit at it, but James, well... His father invented Sleek Easy's hair potion. Did you know that?
What? No way! My brother practically lives off that stuff. I thought his dad worked in the ministry.
He does now.
Remus sips his drink.
I think he started once things got a little dicey politically. Came out of retirement.
Good man. Not sure you get me out of retirement to sort out this mess.
Remus shakes his head.
Yeah, no, me neither. But it's a very Potter thing to do. They're all like that. Their capacity for empathy is a bit boundless. Makes me worry about James, honestly.
He tries and fails not to think about Regulus and about how that's who James is with right now. He knows Sirius read him the riot act when he found out James was seeing someone in Slytherin, but it doesn't seem to have made a difference. Remus suspects that if Sirius knew which Slytherin his best mate was currently with, he wouldn't have let it go so easily. The problem is, this thing between James and Regulus, it's going to get someone hurt. And Remus has a hunch that that someone isn't going to be Regulus.
Hey.
Marlene nudges him lightly with her foot.
Where'd you go?
Remus blinks.
Sorry, just... thinking.
She squints at him as if trying to work him out.
About James?
He nods non-committally, bringing his butterbeer to his mouth.
Funny. I always thought it was Sirius you daydreamed about.
The butterbeer proceeds to come straight back out, spraying across the table.
What?
You can tell Marlene is holding in a laugh as she pulls out her wand and spells away the mess.
Guess I was right after all.
She looks at him smugly, and Remus honestly has no idea what to say to that.
It's the eyes. You two are always making eyes at one another. Big ones, with hearts in the centre. It's adorable, really. Mary thinks that's why you're fighting, by the way.
She says it all so casually that Remus is having a hard time keeping up.
First of all, no we don't. And second of all, why would Mary want me to date you if she thought...
Marlene rolls her eyes.
Right. Well, she hasn't got it quite right. She thinks Sirius made a move on you, so you kicked him out of the dorm.
What?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't even know where to start with that.
That's not why we're fighting.
She gives him a look.
Yeah, I figured it wasn't.
Why would she even think that Sirius would...
That...
Marlene tilts her glass towards him.
I'm not allowed to disclose.
Remus can feel his breath coming too short and too fast. He doesn't like this. People speculating about his life. People getting so close. Knowing things he never told them. It makes him feel trapped.
But you didn't tell her about the hot eyes?
Marlene smiles.
No, I didn't tell her. None of my business.
Remus nods his head, trying and failing to make himself feel better about this. After a few minutes, Marlene reaches across the table, squeezing his hand.
Remus, you don't have to be afraid of me, okay?
When he continues to stare at her, wide-eyed and speechless, she nods her head over her shoulder.
If it makes you feel better, my secret's standing right over there.
It takes Remus a minute to hear what she said over the buzzing panic in his ears. But eventually, he follows her gaze to the bar where Dorcas Meadows is chatting with Rosmerta. Remus blinks a few times.
Dorcas?
Marlene nods, taking another sip of her drink.
That's what you're pretending not to be for Mary?
She nods again. He sags back in his chair, running a hand over his still burning hot face.
Christ. We must be the gayest year in Hogwarts history.
They're laughing both in relief and at the ridiculousness of all of it. All of them running around terrified of one another, of themselves. How exhausting. How unnecessary. He can't help but notice Dorcas looking over at them.
Does she know?
Finally, the pair of them regain their sanity.
Sometimes I think she does. There are these moments where I swear it sits in the room with us, you know?
And oh boy, does Remus ever.
Yeah, I know.
But we've never said anything, done anything.
She shrugs, looking down at the table. Remus watches her for a minute before nudging her with his foot.
You should go talk to her.
For the first time, he sees panic in Marlene's eyes.
Merlin, I don't know. Scarier than falling off a broom, that.
Please, I've seen you do it loads of times.
Yeah, and it was terrifying all of those times.
Okay, fine. But worth it, wasn't it?
She bites her smile, sneaking a look over her shoulder. Dorcas quickly turns her attention back to Rosmerta.
So? No point sitting here on a fake date with me when you've got something real right there.
Marlene's mouth pulls to the side, unconvinced as she turns her drink nervously in her hands.
Listen,
He leans forward.
if it helps, she hasn't stopped looking at you the whole time I've been watching.
Remus Lupin, matchmaker.
Oh Christ, no one wants that.
She smiles at him, taking in a deep breath.
Okay. I'm gonna do it.
You're going to do it.
All right.
She wipes her palms off on her jeans as she gets to her feet.
Wish me luck.
Remus raises his glass.
Good luck.
He watches her walk across the bar, watches Dorcas's face light up when she realizes Marlene is coming to talk to her. And he wonders why it always seems so much simpler when it's other people. Why can he feel so confident about where Marlene and Dorcas stand after only a few minutes, but he never knows where he stands with the people in his own life? Hell, some days he isn't even sure if Sirius likes him. Marlene and Dorcas start heading towards the door, and just before they disappear outside, she looks back at him, giving him a megawatt smile and a thumbs up. He returns the gesture. He hopes it works out. Hopes he was right about Mary. He passes his glass back and forth between his hands and tries to figure out what to do now. He supposes he could just go back to the dorm. It should be empty for once. Maybe he'll actually be able to get some work done. Unless Peter decides to bring Rebecca up there, which, knowing him, he might. Remus grimaces into his butterbeer. Well, there's always the library.
Where's your date?
His head snaps up and he almost laughs as his eyes meet charcoal grey. Sirius hovers at the end of the table, hands in his pockets, looking about as close to nervous as Remus has ever seen him. At least in a non-emergency situation.
She left, actually.
Sirius arches his brow.
That bad?
Yeah, or... No, it was good. It was really nice, but...
But?
Remus shrugs.
Just don't think we're meant to be more than mates.
In that case, may I?
He gestures to Marlene's empty seat, and Remus is faced with the realization that this is exactly the situation he was trying to avoid. Apparently, fate has other plans.
Sure.
He nods, taking another gulp of his butterbeer just to have something to do.
So, what are you doing here?
Sirius gives him a rueful smile.
Oh, you know, I was... thirsty.
Thirsty?
Mm-hmm.
He starts tearing up one of the napkins.
Also, I wanted to spy on your date. You know, make sure you were getting on okay.
Uh-huh. You check on Peter, too?
Obviously.
You need your hobby pads.
Listen, I gotta check up on my boys, alright? And good thing I did, too. Saved you from sitting here all alone and pathetic.
Now instead I get to sit here and be insulted.
Exactly!
Sirius grins at Remus, who feels his chest grow tight. He tries to shake it off, but he can't get anything past Sirius.
Moons?
Sorry, I just...
He lets out a deep breath, staring down at the table for a minute.
Do you want me to go?
No.
Okay. Do you want me to stay?
No.
I see.
Yeah.
Because really, that's it. In a nutshell. How he feels about Sirius. He wants to never see him again, except that he also wants to see him every second of every day. It is endlessly frustrating.
Will you do something with me?
Remus makes himself hold Sirius's stare, even if it cracks some of his ribs to do it.
Of course.
He nods.
Good. Or... thanks, I guess. Well, let's, go then.
He slides out of the booth and starts towards the door, Sirius jogging to catch up with him.
Wow, you're really on a mission, huh?
They push into the crisp fall air.
Just worried I'll lose my nerve if I stop to think about it.
You won't.
You don't even know where we're going.
Don't need to.
Sirius shrugs.
I know your nerves.
Remus looks over at him, meeting Sirius's eyes. Merlin, he feels that look right down to his toes. He quickly goes back to staring straight ahead. They don't talk, which is unusual for Sirius, but Remus gets the feeling that he's trying to follow Remus's lead, and Remus is currently just trying not to be sick. He wants to get over it, what happened last year, and this is the closest he's come to figuring out how. It takes Sirius longer than he would have thought to realize where they're going. It speaks to the type of person he is that his steps only falter for a second.
Are we?
Yeah.
The main street is fading into the background behind them, and the lone figure of the shrieking shack comes more fully into view. So named for the terrible screaming that comes from inside. He's often heard the first and second years trying to guess what kind of monster makes them. On the days when he's feeling especially bitter, he thinks about telling them. They climb through the fence, making their way silently up the front steps and unlocking the door.
Alohomora.
Immediately, Remus feels a chill run down his spine, legs locking up on the threshold, his whole body revolting against the idea of being here.
Remus?
I'm fine.
He takes a deep breath and presses forward. He hears Sirius close the door behind them. This building is only slightly less eerie in the daytime. The windows are boarded up, light coming through the cracks in crisscrossing lines that cut scars in the dark. It smells heavily of rot and sweat and earth, like the whole place is slowly decaying. He stops in the bedroom. His bedroom, really. Stops in front of the dirty, stained mattress he dies on once a month. He can hear memories like ghosts. Can hear the sound of his bones cracking, voice breaking, thoughts falling apart. Sirius stays by the door, Remus with his back to him.
I told James not to come that night.
Remus slowly opens the door on memories he's spent months trying to rip out of his head.
Why?
Because you weren't back yet. Because you just lost your uncle and I thought it was too much to ask you to do. This... after that. Because it seemed unfair to leave you alone.
James told you to fuck off.
Remus actually manages to laugh despite the constricting weight that's been building in his chest since they walked through the door.
Yeah, pretty much. Still, when you were all late, I thought... I don't know. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe you came back in worse shape than he'd thought.
He can already feel the fear swelling inside him. The anxiety of that night crawling along his skin.
But it's worse alone. The full moon. So when I heard the door open downstairs, I was relieved. Selfishly.
This is where the story starts to hurt.
Remus.
No, please, I need to do this. I need you to hear this. To feel it. Because you weren't here. Because you don't have all these memories. And I hate you for it. I can't forgive you for not being here. So I need you to be here now. I need you to hear it. I need you to help me fucking carry this, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, Mooney. Okay.
Remus nods, his nails digging into the palms of his hands.
You'll hate this, but I thought he was you at first. It was dark in his hair, so for a second, when he was walking down that hallway, I thought he was you. I thought Sirius came. He came for me.
He has to stop again, stop himself from losing control. It seems stupid now, but at the time he had felt so happy seeing Sirius walk towards him. It made everything that came afterwards hurt so much more.
When I saw that it was Snape, I thought I was in a fucking nightmare. Kept waiting for myself to wake up. He was asking me questions, but I couldn't really hear him. I was in so much pain at that point that everything was just fuzzy. I kept begging him to leave. He had his wand and I didn't, and he kept stepping closer to me and I had to back all the way up against the wall. I've never felt so trapped before. Never felt so fucking scared.
He's shaking now, a cold sweat breaking out over his skin as flashes of that night rushed through his head.
And then James was there and that was better and worse all at the same time. Because then there was the chance that I could hurt him too.
He closes his eyes briefly.
They're different, my memories. When I'm a wolf. But I do remember. I pushed them down the stairs. James and Snape. And there was blood. There was so much blood. I loved it. I wanted more of it. Of the smell. The taste. I wanted more. And James was so scared I could feel him. And I loved that too.
It's getting harder to keep his breathing even. Small black spots flickering across his vision.
I've never felt that before. Even as a wolf. Never felt the need to bite so badly. And I fucking hate that I know now that it's in me, that I'm capable of it. Hate that those feelings ever existed inside me. That they still exist inside me.
He forces his fists to relax, forces himself to turn around. Sirius is still in the doorway, watching Remus, pale-faced and wide-eyed.
I licked their blood off the floor.
The bile crawls up the back of Remus's throat, hunger stirring in his stomach.
Greyback might have made me a werewolf, but you, Sirius, you made me a monster.
Sirius doesn't flinch, doesn't drop his gaze.
No, Remus. You're not the monster in the story, okay? None of that was your fault. It was mine. It's me.
Remus doesn't know why he feels like fighting with him, why some part of him violently reacts against that. Sirius steps forward, hand reaching out, and Remus doesn't move. Not away, not towards, letting Sirius cup his face.
Let me take this, huh? Just like you said. Let me carry it. It's mine anyway.
Remus feels something choked at the back of his throat, and he leans too much into Sirius's touch.
I thought I knew how to live with this thing inside me, but those memories make it so fucking hard.
You're not a monster, Remus. Not now, and not when you turn.
I'm dangerous. That's why we're here. Why there's a Whomping Willow on the grounds. To protect you all from me.
To protect us from you, and you from us.
Sirius's thumb strokes Remus's cheek.
We're all dangerous, Remus. I was dangerous when I told Snape how to find you. He was dangerous when he came in here with his wand raised. You think anyone in that castle is safe 100% of the time? All of us have wolves, Moony. All we can do is try and keep them on their leashes.
Remus looks up at Sirius.
Thank you.
Sirius smiles sadly before his hand slips down from Remus's face to his shoulder, pulling him into a hug. Both of them holding on tightly, as though worried the other will disappear if they don't. It goes on too long. Remus knows he should pull away. He doesn't.
We should probably head back.
Sirius's breath brushes against Remus's ear.
I think we're cutting it close.
No, Remus almost says. Not yet. I don't want to let you go. I don't want to let go yet, but of course, he has to. Remus wipes at his face when they part, happy to find it dry.
Thank you for coming with me.
He feels there is so much else to say.
Of course.
Sirius nods.
I'd do anything for you, Remus.
Which is a cruel thing to say in Remus's opinion, because it isn't true, but he thinks that Sirius wants it to be. Wants to believe that he would do anything for Remus, which hurts more in the end. Of course, Remus doesn't say any of that. Instead, he just nods, aching as he follows Sirius back out into the sun. If Remus and Marlene thought they were going to get away with torpedoing a date arranged by Mary MacDonald, they were sorely mistaken. For the rest of the weekend, it's all Remus hears about every time he's even remotely in her vicinity. And judging by Marlene's tone on Sunday evening, she's had it just as bad.
Mary, please give it a rest.
The upper year Gryffindors have monopolised the common room, with Mary glaring at anyone who dares to try and sit on one of the sofas near them.
I'm just saying.
We know what you're just saying. You've said it. I promise you, Remus didn't ditch me to hang out with Sirius. If anything, I ditched him.
Marlene's cheeks heat slightly as she gives Dorcas a brief look and then turns away again. Mary throws her hands up.
You two are unbelievable.
To be fair, you've never been a very good matchmaker.
Mary's eyes narrow.
Excuse me? I'm an amazing matchmaker.
Remember that time you made me go out with Michael Kitchum?
I'm sorry. You went out with Michael Kitchum. That guy's like the biggest tool I've ever met, and he's not even in Slytherin.
I know. He was even worse than you.
Oi!
Merlin, I forgot about that. You didn't talk to her for like a week afterwards.
Mary waves her hand dismissively.
Okay, so I made one miscalculation.
There was also that time when...
How was your date, Peter?
Marlene smiles in triumph, catching Remus's eye and giving him a wink. Peter has a dreamy look on his face.
It was brilliant. She's amazing.
Aw, cute.
We're going to hang out again tomorrow at lunch.
What? Peter, mealtimes are sacred.
Are they?
Family bonding.
I'm sorry. You're just making this up. This is not a thing.
He turns to Peter.
This isn't a thing, right?
Peter shakes his head, but before he can speak, James cuts across him.
Padfoot, are you hearing this? Petey's abandoning us at lunch of all times.
What's so special about lunch?
What's so special about lunch? I can't... Pat, Sirius, hello? Help me out here.
Sirius blinks.
Sorry.
He swipes a hand over his face before turning to James. He's been in a weird mood since they got back from the shack. James quirks his brow.
Wow, you're really spacing out over there, huh?
Yeah, sorry. Just feeling a bit... Anyway.
Sirius shrugs.
Well, while you were daydreaming, Peter announced that he's throwing us over for some floozy.
Her name is Rebecca!
Without a word, Sirius reaches over and cuffs Peter on the back of the head.
Ow, what the hell?
Where's your loyalty, Wormtail? Bitches before witches.
Wait, hold on. Does that make you three the bitches?
Absolutely.
Sirius, darling.
Mary leans forward.
I feel like maybe you don't know what that word means.
I have a fairly decent grasp of the definition. I've always been partial to female dogs. Very loyal creatures.
And just like that, James is giving Sirius a playful kick and everything is back to normal. Except Remus can still see the tightness at the corners of Sirius's eyes. He knows he put it there. That was the plan. He just wonders if he can live with it now.
Honestly, I think I'm in love with her.
James reaches over and voices Peter's hair.
God,
Sirius
boo.
jabs him in the stomach.
Peter, it's been one day. Do try to pace yourself or you'll scare the girl away.
Peter's face is bright red.
I wasn't going to tell her that.
Uh-huh.
Sirius leans back against the sofa.
Sure you weren't. Mary's right. You gotta play hard to get.
Nah, fuck these guys. You think you love her, you tell her. She can't handle it. She's not the girl for you.
Christ, James. I didn't know you were such a romantic.
Lily is only half joking, Remus reckons. James looks over at her, brow arched.
You didn't?
Yeah, you didn't.
He's like the biggest sap I've ever met.
James looks over at her, bowing his head.
I'll wear that title with pride, McKinnon.
Romance is for optimists.
Oh yeah? What's for the skeptics then?
Mary smiles.
Sex, mostly.
Her eyes go to Sirius.
Isn't that right?
He salutes her.
Absolutely.
Remus remembers the first time he saw Mary and Sirius together. Remembers the raw, all-consuming jealousy that had bubbled up inside of him. Partially because she was touching him, and partially because he knew that he would never be able to fit with Sirius the way that Mary did. Never be able to look right. And he suspects Sirius knows it. That thought forms a rook in the pit of his stomach.
Well, as much as I love you all, I really need to finish my charms essay.
Boo!
You
Oh, God,
bitch!
boo.
Oh, come on, Mooney. Don't go. Finish it tomorrow.
It's due tomorrow.
Remus gets to his feet, the whole time feeling Sirius's eyes on him. Hot and intense in a way that Remus knows he can't look at directly or it'll take him apart.
Remus.
Remus waves her off.
I know. You all miss me terribly, but I'm sure you'll survive a few hours on your own.
I don't know about that. If you go, who's going to stop Wormtail from proposing marriage to the girl he just met?
Oi!
I'm sure you'll manage.
Sirius is still looking at him and not saying anything, and Remus doesn't know what's going on, but the attention is starting to make him feel jumpy.
All right, well, night, Remus.
Yeah. Night.
Remus smiles tightly before turning around, hoping that when he's alone he'll be able to shake off this feeling, but he barely makes it to the stairs.
Remus.
There's something about the way he says it. Remus turns around right away. Sirius is already on his feet, walking towards him.
What is it? What's wrong?
But he doesn't get to finish his sentence because Sirius's hands take his face and Sirius's mouth swallows up his voice. For a second, Remus can't breathe, can't think, certain he's hallucinating. Except that Sirius's touch is too warm and steady to be all in his head, his lips pressing too heavily into Remus's own. And then he feels himself wake up, feels his body come to life, and madly, stupidly, he starts kissing Sirius back. One hand running through the hair at the nape of his neck and the other going to his lower back. Remus's world suddenly becomes no bigger than the parts of him that Sirius touches. His whole life reduced to a sensation, to a single thought. Please, don't stop. Don't let go. Don't leave me again. Please, please, please. Sirius pulls back, hands dropping to clutch at Remus's shirt, both of them breathing heavy.
I wanted to.
What?
Sirius's eyes are ablaze, and Remus can't look away.
That's why I kissed you. I wanted to. I want you. I know it's been too long, that I fucked up, but I want you. I always have.
Those words thrum through Remus, shaking his whole chest. He feels the familiar fear that's been there every time he's looked at Sirius since the incident last year. But it's duller now, fighting back against all the parts of Remus that crave Sirius, that reach for him like he's the sun.
Have me then.
Remus can barely believe the words come out of his mouth. Sirius's face breaks into a smile. It's open and vulnerable, and Remus wants to taste it. So he does.
Have me. Have me, have me. Have me.
Remus.
Yes! Both Sirius and Remus look up to find their friends on their feet. James is actually standing on the sofa, cheering like Gryffindor has just won the cup. The only person who looks surprised at all is Peter. But he's clapping too, if not a little less enthusiastically.
Think our friends will be okay with this?
Sirius drops his head into the crook of Remus's neck, and even that small gesture, sets fires in his chest.
I think they'll learn to live with it.
Before Remus has the chance to say anything else, James is off the sofa and practically tackling them both to the ground.
Oh, Merlin, you two are idiots.
The three of them stumble backwards.
James, really?
Remus tries and fails to push his friend off.
Group hug!
Before he has the chance to break free, he feels the weight of another 5 bodies collide with them, sending all of them to the floor in a tangled mess of limbs and laughter. Somehow, in the chaos, Remus manages to find Sirius's eyes again. Okay, Sirius mouths. And Remus feels himself smiling too big. Normally he would be embarrassed, but he can't find it in himself to care right at this moment. So instead he leans forward, kissing Sirius quickly on the mouth, sparks shooting through him when Sirius's hand comes up to his neck, stopping him from pulling away.
Perfect. I'm perfect.
It all feels a bit like a dream, even after everyone goes to bed. Even after Sirius sneaks over to kiss him goodnight. Even after he's finally able to get himself to calm down enough to sleep. None of it feels real. This sort of thing, it doesn't happen to Remus. It happens to James, maybe even Sirius, but not him. He isn't the main character of the story.
Mooney.
Remus's eyes blink open, the first cracks of morning light filtering into the room, and Sirius is on top of him, smiling, hair tousled.
There you are.
What time is it?
Early. James just left for practice.
Really early then? Especially for you.
Yeah, well.
Sirius's eyes drop down to Remus's mouth and he feels his stomach flip.
I was going to go back to sleep, but then I remembered that I get to do this now.
He bends down, bringing their mouths together, messy and desperate and warm. Please, Remus almost moans out loud. Don't stop. Don't let go. Don't leave me again. Please, please, please. Because he knows deep down that this was never supposed to happen to him. He isn't the main character of the story, but he wants it anyway.
I'm just saying,
They slide into their seats in potions.
if you're going to start doing stuff in our room, you could at least use a bloody silencing charm.
Oh, leave them alone, Wormtail.
Peter looks mutinous.
Easy for you to say. You didn't have to listen to them.
Merlin, Peter.
Sirius rolls his eyes, looking far too pleased with himself.
We were only snogging.
Still gross.
Sirius pushes his chair back so that he's balancing on its hind 2 legs, arms behind his head. Just under his collar, Remus can see the mark he left on him this morning, and a ridiculous flush rushes through his whole body. Sirius catches him looking and winks.
Sorry, Peter. Won't happen again.
The hell it won't.
Remus is just about to tell them both off when he notices Professor Slughorn walking towards them.
Mr. Lupin?
Good morning, Professor.
Remus isn't entirely sure what's going on.
Sorry. Were we being too loud? We weren't aware class had started yet.
No. Professor McGonagall would like to speak with you in her office. She said to take your stuff and not to expect you back.
Oh.
Slughorn smiles a little.
She did not give me the impression that you're in trouble, so there's no need to look quite so frightened.
Right. Thank you, Professor.
Not a problem.
Slughorn heads back to the front of the class while Remus reaches for his bag.
What's this about then?
Sirius's chair slams back down onto all fours.
You curse someone else, Mooney?
You're turning into a right little bad boy, aren't you?
You heard him. I'm not in trouble. Must be something to do with prefect duty. I'll see you guys at lunch, yeah?
See, Peter?
James nudges Peter with his elbow.
Lunch. That meal we have together.
Peter rolls his eyes. Holding in a laugh, Remus turns to leave when Sirius's foot hooks around his ankle.
Don't get into any more fights on the way to her office, alright? It'll break McGonagall's heart if she thinks we've finally corrupted you.
Hilarious. Can I go now?
Yeah, alright. See you later, bad boy.
Sirius gives him a smile that makes tectonic plates shift in Remus's chest. All he can do in response is shake his head, blushing furiously as he ducks out of the classroom. He's in such a good mood that he almost forgets that he's on his way to McGonagall's office. He knows they still have so much to talk about, him and Sirius. So much to get past. But they will, because Sirius wants him. He wants him. Those words sing through Remus, just like the memory of waking up this morning with Sirius's weight on top of him.
Come in. Close the door behind you, please.
Remus is surprised to find her standing in front of her desk, instead of sitting behind it, and it pulls him up short.
Professor? Professor Slughorn said you wanted to see me?
Yes.
There's something in the look she gives him that isn't quite right. It's too soft, almost sad.
Though, it's your father who wants to speak with you, not I.
Remus blinks, now really lost.
My father?
He looks around dumbly as though expecting him to jump out from behind some piece of furniture. Professor McGonagall nods, gesturing to the fireplace just behind her.
He'll be calling any minute now.
She walks forward, hand squeezing Remus's shoulder as she passes him.
I'll give you two some privacy.
Privacy?
McGonagall closes the door behind her. He looks back at the office, which feels so much more ominous now that he's in it alone. Don't panic, he tells himself. It can't be that bad. Not if he's only fire calling. If it was a real emergency, he would be here. Just don't panic. Not until you know.
Remus?
His father's voice breaks him out of his thoughts.
Here. Here.
Remus moves quickly, dropping down in front of the fireplace and finding his father's flickering face staring back up at him.
What is it, Dad? What's happened?
His father looks stern, but then he almost always does.
Is McGonagall there? Did she tell you anything?
Remus shakes his head.
No, she's gone. Just said you wanted to talk to me?
And his father never wants to talk to him, not even when they're in the same house. Lyle's hand comes up to rub his forehead.
It's your mother.
Remus feels something cold run down his spine. It drips around his heart, fills his lungs.
What happened? Where is she?
She's dead, Remus.
For a second, 1 second, he thinks his dad is joking. Not that it's a very funny joke, and really, this is a bit of an elaborate setup. But that's the only way his brain can make sense of what his father is saying. Because his mother isn't dead. She just isn't. She can't be. There's no reason for her to be. His father, sure, his job is dangerous. He has enemies. But his mum? All she does is live in their cottage and bake and send Remus about 50 letters a week, and it's annoying, but it's mostly sweet because he knows she's just doing her best. And he loves her for it. He loves her. His mum. His mad, overprotective mum. He loves her, and really she's all he has if you think about it. So she isn't dead. She isn't. She isn't.
I don't understand.
The funeral will be Thursday. McGonagall is going to organize a portkey so that you can come. I'll write to you with the time. She said you could come home and tell them, but I told her no. I'm just going to be at work the whole time, so I can't see the point.
Dad!
What he really wants to say is stop. Stop now, please. You've made your point, whatever sick point it was. I want to see her. I want to see my mum. I need to. I love her, and she isn't dead, so I need to see her.
What happened?
There was an accident.
An accident?
No, she isn't. She isn't. She isn't.
What do you mean? There was an accident.
She She took too much of a medication, bloody muggle stuff. I told her not to bother with it, but she insisted.
Remus blinks, no more equipped to deal with that information than any of the information that had come before it. She isn't. The voice sounds pathetic and grasping. She isn't.
That doesn't sound like an accident.
It's clearly the wrong thing to say because his father's face instantly hardens.
Leave it, Remus.
How did she accidentally take too much of a medication, Dad?
I told you to leave it.
She was so alone in that house.
He knows. Knows he should stop. But he can't. The words just keep coming. Words he's meant to say forever, but could never bring himself to. Was never brave enough to.
You took her away from her family, her friends. You brought her into this world that doesn't want her, and then you just left her? Just left her all fucking alone.
Enough!
His father has never raised his voice before, but Remus barely hears it.
How could you do that to her? How could you do that to us?
I couldn't make any of it better. Not you, not her. I couldn't fix either of you. What was I supposed to do?
Remus stares at him and... Oh no. He thinks he might actually start losing it now.
Fuck!
He curls over like he's just been punched in the gut, pressure building behind his eyes.
Oh fuck, she's dead. She's dead, fuck.
Remus, what's the matter?
Which is a ridiculous question given the circumstances. And he suddenly realises how much he doesn't want to do this here, in front of him, on the floor of McGonagall's office. So he tries to pull his denial back around himself, cracked and chipped as it is. Tries to push this all down, just until he can get back to his room. His bed.
Why did you marry her?
The question punches out of him as he raises his head to look at his father again. Because he's always wondered. Because suddenly he just needs to know.
Why did you have me?
His father watches him for a minute, like maybe, for once, he's actually seeing Remus.
I thought it would be different.
Well, sorry we couldn't live up to your expectations.
Remus.
Goodbye, Dad.
The face flickers in front of him for a second longer before it disappears. Remus tries to get up but doesn't make it very far, grabbing hold of McGonagall's desk for support. His mum is dead. His mum, who tried so hard to take care of him, to be there, to make up for the one time that she wasn't, who squeezed him so tight sometimes he thought he was going to burst. He's never going to see her again. He's never going to touch her, never going to hear her sing or see her cooking in the kitchen. Remus tries to breathe, but there are just so many fucking nevers. They're crowding his chest, filling his lungs. How is he meant to let go of all of that at once? How does he cope with losing all of her at once? McGonagall steps in.
Sorry.
Remus reaches down, clumsily grabbing his bag.
Sorry, I'm sure you want your office back.
Please. It's more than all right. Take all the time you need. I just wanted to let you know that you will not be required to attend any of your classes for the rest of the week. And that I have also had Mr. Potter, Black, and Pettigrew excused from their classes as well, though just for today. I expect by now they'll be waiting for you back at Gryffindor Tower.
Remus looks up, meeting her kind eyes, feeling his throat grow tight.
Thank you.
Anything you need, Remus.
It's a shock, hearing his first name come out of her mouth.
You let me know.
He nods, moving towards the door, desperate to get out, to get to the safety of his own room. But still he pauses before he leaves.
Really?
He turns back to look at her.
Thank you.
He's not sure he's ever meant anything quite so much. She gives him a sad smile.
Of course.
And then Remus is pushing out the door and into the corridor outside. He doesn't remember much of the walk back to the dorms. Mostly he keeps his head down and tries not to think. He knows that death happens, knows that people get left behind and that they find ways to move on with their lives. He just can't quite figure out how. Because she isn't just dead today. She's dead tomorrow too. And the day after that. And that. And that. She will be dead every day for the rest of his life. How are you supposed to deal with a loss that big? He nearly trips up the stairs to his room, taking them two at a time, glad that everyone is still in class. When he pushes through the door, he finds his 3 best friends waiting. James leaning against his bedpost, Sirius pacing in front of the window, Peter sitting down, legs crossed. They freeze at the sight of him, the room more quiet than Remus has ever heard it. None of the lights are on, the space lit only with the dull morning sun. Remus can feel himself cracking already. All those thoughts he'd been pushing out, rushing in. And he wonders if McGonagall told them what's happened and feels a jolt of fear at the thought of having to tell them himself. Of having to say the words out loud because he's not sure he can. And then Sirius is stepping forward, pulling Remus into his arms. And he goes willingly, burying his head in Sirius's chest. James is next, then Peter. The 3 of them holding him together as he slowly starts to shatter and break apart. They keep all the pieces of him, stop them from rolling away, from getting lost, making sure his grief doesn't do anything that can't be undone. In the haze of tears and choking sobs, Remus discovers the answer to his own question. Because this, of course, is how people deal with loss. This is how they survive their grief. Together. The day of his mother's funeral, Remus walks into the dorm room to find his 3 best friends dressed in black suits. He stops in front of the door, staring at them, his own suit heavy on his skin. They're well into fall, but the fabric somehow still manages to feel suffocating.
Where did you get those?
Have a little faith, Moony. We know how to buy Muggle clothes.
Lily got them for us.
Peter earns himself an elbow to the ribs. Remus arches his brow.
She got you 3 perfectly tailored suits.
He tries not to let his eyes linger on Sirius, on the way the clothes hug his chest and thighs.
She used magic for the tailoring.
James shuffles his feet.
Is this okay, or do we need to,
No, it's fine. It suits you.
Remus blinks a few times, getting the moisture out of his eyes.
So, you're coming then?
James looks taken aback by the question, but it's Sirius who speaks first.
Do you want us there?
Remus meets his eyes for the first time. His beautiful eyes on his beautiful face, wearing his beautiful suit. It's too much, really.
Yes.
Then we'll be there.
Remus thinks about kissing him. Doesn't. But he doesn't look away either, desperate to suck the calm confidence out of Sirius's stare, to steal it for himself.
Well, we should get going. We have to be in Hogsmeade by 9:30 for the port key.
Remus shakes himself awake.
Right. Yeah, thank you for coming.
James's face softens as he walks forward, hand squeezing Remus's shoulder.
You don't need to thank us. This is what we're here for.
They make their way out of the room. James and Peter up front, Sirius and Remus behind, walking close enough that their shoulders brush. When they get to the common room, Remus is pulled up short for the 2nd time that morning. Sirius landing on the stair just below him, looking up.
Wow, fantastic job with the suits.
Mary's eyes are running the boys over. Mary, Marlene and Lily are standing in the middle of the common room, each dressed in black and looking very much like they've been waiting for them. Remus opens his mouth, but nothing comes out except a shaky exhale. After a few more of those, Sirius reaches up, squeezing his hand until Remus is able to tear his eyes away from his friends and down to his... well, down to Sirius.
Okay.
Remus almost laughs, almost cries. Finally, he manages a nod.
Well, all right then, let's get this show on the road, shall we?
McGonagall okay with this?
Slowly, they make their way out of the common room and towards the front of the castle.
Like Lily gave her a choice.
Remus's eyes find Lily a few paces ahead and he feels his throat grow tight. He isn't sure what he was expecting his friends to do. They hadn't talked about it, but he never could have asked them for this. It's too much, really. As if reading his mind, Sirius leans a little heavier against Remus's side, just to let him know that he's there. They're out to their friends, but here in the halls, it's easier to be a little more discreet. It's overcast today, the way it gets in the fall, making everything feel deep and saturated, the air cold. They walk down to the village in silence. Remus isn't sure if that's his fault or not, but either way, he hasn't got the energy to rectify the situation. Honestly, he kind of likes it, just listening to the sounds of their footsteps next to his. The port key is set up outside the post office. Owls flying out overhead as they gather around the old satchel that McGonagall told them to look for.
Is your father meeting us here or at the funeral home?
His letter said here.
Lily nods, though he doesn't miss the look she exchanges with Marlene. The portkey is set to leave in 15 minutes. Lyle is late. Not that that's all that surprising. He usually is.
I've never been to a Muggle funeral before.
Peter's voice is sounding overly loud in the silence.
What? I'm shocked.
Sirius's sarcasm earns him a shove from Peter.
Boys, don't make me separate you.
Sirius smirks.
I was just wondering if they were a lot different from Wizard ones, that's all. Like, I don't know, what do you do with Muggles?
Peter turns to Remus, who shakes his head.
I've never been to one either. Never been to any funeral.
You do know that Muggles aren't another species, don't you, Peter?
Pete didn't mean anything by it, but then he also doesn't have to walk down the halls listening to the Slytherins whisper mudblood under their breath. Peter's cheeks flush pink.
No, I know, of course, I just meant I always feel a little uncomfortable around them. I never know what to say or...
Peter realises that none of this is making the situation better.
Just be polite, Peter.
Lily sends him a weak smile.
Let them talk to you about her. People like to tell stories at these things. It helps.
Peter nods, perhaps a bit too enthusiastically.
Thanks. Yeah, I can do that.
It's at that moment that a translucent hawk sweeps down on them. It looks vaguely like a ghost, and had Remus not seen it a dozen times before, he might have been scared. Still, as it is, his stomach drops.
Held up at work. Go without me.
Remus blinks down at the bird, not quite able to accept what he's just heard. Waiting for the second half of the message. The, "Ha ha, just joking, son, I'll be there in 10. Of course, that doesn't happen. And after a few seconds of silence, the Patronus dissolves into nothing but white vapour. Go without me. His father does not know that Remus's friends have volunteered to come with him. As far as Lyle Lupin is aware, his son is completely alone. Go without me. Remus's chest suddenly feels uncomfortably tight.
Bastard.
He's scared of them.
Remus is impressed by how steady his voice sounds, eyes still trained on the spot where the hawk disappeared.
Scared of who?
Her family.
Then he's a coward and a bastard.
Sirius.
No, it's alright.
Remus finally forces himself to look up, meeting Sirius's gaze.
Someone should hate him.
And it can't be me, he doesn't say. Because he's my dad. Because he's the only home I have left. Sirius gives Remus a small smile, leaning into his side again as the satchel begins to light up in front of them.
Let's get this over with, yeah?
There's general nodding around the circle as they all step forward and place their hands on the bag. Sirius on one side of Remus and James on the other, like two pillars holding him up. If he's being honest, all forms of wizard transport make Remus feel a bit sick. Fluing, flying, portkeys. He hasn't apparated yet, but he's sure he'll feel the same about that. When his feet slam into the pavement of the London suburb, he feels the entire contents of his stomach enter his esophagus.
Steady on.
Sirius has one hand on his hip and the other on his shoulder. Remus can't tell if his hands feel so good because this is new or because it's old. Sirius has never been stingy with his touches, with affection in general, at least not in superficial ways like this. Peter once suggested it was because he wasn't hugged enough as a kid and James shoved him off the bed for that.
You know where we're going?
Remus blinks up at James through the haze of his memories.
Yeah.
Remus had been looking up the funeral home on the city map every hour since his father wrote to him with the time and place. In theory, he shouldn't have needed to. In theory, his father should have been here to guide him there himself. But then, maybe some subconscious part of Remus had always known that that was never going to happen.
Yeah. I know where we're going.
It's a surreal experience, walking through the Muggle suburb with his friends. They feel so loud even though they barely speak. Like every person they pass, every house, knows they don't belong. Don't you belong? Asks the voice in his head. He isn't James after all, isn't Sirius. He's just as much Muggle as he is wizard. Except it doesn't feel that way. He barely knows the Muggle part of himself. His feet stutter as the funeral home comes into view. An unassuming building made of red brick and wood doors, a manicured garden in front, a parking lot full of cars he doesn't recognise wrapping around the back. His friends stop behind him.
I can't do this.
Yes,
you don't have to.
Oh, doesn't that just sum the two of them up? James always so willing to shield you. Sirius always so willing to put the sword in your hands. Remus finds himself turning to Peter, who stands with an uncertain look on his face, hands in his pockets.
What do you think, Pete?
Peter's eyes widen slightly at being asked, looking from James to Sirius, and then back to Remus.
I think whatever you want to do is what your mum would want you to do.
Which is both sweet and unhelpful, but that's Peter for you. Remus stares down the building in front of him, wishing he was somewhere else. Wishing he was someone else. It's not a new dream.
Okay.
Eventually he forces himself to relax, to breathe.
Okay, let's go in.
Sirius squeezes his shoulder, Lily coming up beside him and taking his hand. He looks at both of them before letting out another shuddering exhale and stepping forward. The inside of the building is beige. Beige carpet, beige wallpaper, beige furniture. It smells vaguely of rose potpourri and egg sandwiches, and Remus almost immediately wants to turn around and head back out. He doesn't belong here. He's not entirely sure where he does belong, but it's definitely not here. Not in this room where it feels like he can't touch anything, full of people he doesn't know.
Remus?
He looks up and sees Aunt Miriam walking towards him. He hasn't seen her in years, but when he was little she used to visit in the summer with her 2 kids and her husband. He never noticed before how much she looks like his mother. He squeezes Lily's hand and she squeezes back.
Oh, honey, it's good to see you. I was beginning to worry you'd gotten lost.
She pulls him into a hug that's too tight, but he doesn't bother fighting it. Eventually she pulls back, hands still resting on his shoulders. Her eyes are sad, red-rimmed. Clearly she's been crying. Remus doesn't know what he looks like. He hasn't cried since the day he found out. After a few seconds she starts scanning the small crowd around him.
Where's your father?
He got held up at work.
He hates his father for not giving him a better excuse. Her gaze comes back to him.
Held up at work? They couldn't let him go for his wife's funeral?
Remus shrugs helplessly and he sees her expression soften again.
Well, nothing to be done about it, I suppose.
She pulls him forward, kissing the top of his head, all rather familiar for a woman he hasn't seen since he was 9.
Come on, the family's waiting in the room just over here. The ceremony will start in a few minutes. Your friends can go take their seats.
She smiles weakly at them over Remus's shoulder, her eyes pausing on Lily.
Unless your girlfriend wants to come with you? Sarah might make a fuss, but she always does.
For a second, Remus considers going along with it just so he won't have to be alone. A second too long, apparently, because he feels Sirius go stiff.
I'm not his girlfriend.
Oh. Sorry, I just thought...
She looks down at Lily's hand, the one Remus has been clinging to for dear life since they first walked in.
Well, anyway, you can all go in. Remus will join you at the reception afterwards.
Are you sure I can't sit with them?
The collar of his shirt suddenly feels too tight.
Don't be silly, Remus. You're her son.
As though that means anything anymore.
Besides, you have to be up at the front with us to give your speech.
Ah, right. That. Part of him had been hoping they'd forget about the speech. The parchment in his pocket feels like an anchor dragging him below the tide.
Right.
Okay, well, we'll see you soon, yeah?
James squeezes Remus's shoulder as he passes. Peter following closely behind, sparing Remus a sympathetic smile.
You'll be alright.
Lily gives him a quick kiss on the cheek.
What she said.
Mary kisses him too before following after Lily, Marlene at her side. Sirius drags behind, eyes flicking up to Remus's aunt who's still hovering behind him, a friendly smile on her face. Eventually, after giving up hope that she'd get the hint and give them some space, he reaches out and circles Remus's wrist with his fingers.
I'm right here, okay?
Remus nods.
Yeah. Okay.
You can do this, Remus.
Sirius leans in so close their foreheads are almost touching. Remus closes his eyes briefly, breathing in the familiar scent of him.
Okay.
And then Sirius is pulling away, disappearing through the doors into the chapel.
Your friends seem lovely.
Remus tries and fails to smile back.
They are.
She guides him down a short hallway filled with generic paintings of landscapes and still lifes. Everything about this place makes his skin itch. It's too soft, coddling, as though muted colours and perfume will take away the sting of losing his mother. Besides, Remus has never been good at soft. He's all claws and teeth and scars.
Here we are.
Miriam opens a wood-panelled door. The room inside is no better than the rest of the building. Worse, maybe, if you take into consideration the dozen or so people dressed in black who all turn towards the door as they enter. He feels himself freeze, Miriam's hand coming down on his shoulder and giving it a squeeze.
Everyone, this is Remus.
He's seen some of these faces before. Miriam's children, his grandmother, his Aunt Sarah, but the rest of them are strangers. Jesus, he thinks, looking around the room. Are these people supposed to be my family? Miriam gives him a light shove into the room.
Not long now until the ceremony. Just make yourself comfortable, okay, honey?
He watches her walk over to a man he assumes is her husband, though he doesn't recognize him. He swallows, straightening out his jacket and looking back at the room of somber faces, spotting a coffee cart against the far wall. Not that he drinks coffee, but at least it'll give him something to do with his hands. He wonders if Sirius brought a flask with him. It seems like something he would do, and Remus could use a shot of fire whiskey right about now.
What the fuck happened to his face?
He tries not to let that bother him. He knows what he looks like after all. Knows it's shocking to people who haven't seen him before. Over the years he's gotten used to it, but his mum never did. She hated it when people would point them out. Hated answering questions. Being reminded of where the marks came from. Maybe that's why it stings so much right now. His hands shake as he reaches for one of the coffee mugs.
Lyle not showing up then?
Remus jumps, looking over to find his Aunt Sarah standing beside him. If Miriam is warm and kind, Sarah is cold and harsh. She's the oldest sister, with a long, thin face and dark hair. You'd never know she was related to his mother, except for her eyes. It's almost unnerving how similar they are.
No. He got held up at work.
Seems to happen to him a lot.
Remus does his best not to grimace.
Yeah.
They stand in silence for a minute, Remus playing nervously with the mug in his hands, trying to signal Miriam to come rescue him. All the while, Sarah looks him up and down with his dead mother's eyes.
Honestly, I wasn't expecting him to come. Always was a bloody coward. Never faced up to anything.
Remus wants to feel indignant, but, well, she isn't exactly wrong, is she?
But then, I wasn't expecting to see you either.
That takes him by surprise.
Me? She's my mum.
Was.
The word is sharp, meant to hurt. And it does. Remus only just manages not to whine like an injured animal.
Was my mum.
You've always been more his than hers.
Remus isn't sure that would have been a compliment coming from anyone, but it certainly isn't one coming from Sarah.
I could have saved her, you know. I tried to save her. We were so close when we were kids. We were close until the day that psychopath walked into her life. Shut her away in that house in the middle of nowhere. Sucked the life out of her.
Remus puts his mug back down on the table, certain that if he doesn't, he'll end up smashing it on something.
I would have gotten her away from him eventually. I would have made her see sense. I think that Lyle knew that.
She practically spits on the ground when she says his name, and through his own grief, Remus can just make out the tremor in her voice, where her nails are digging into her arm, the wetness at the corners of her eyes.
So he knocked her up with you, and there was nothing any of us could do after that.
Without thinking, Remus reaches out and grabs hold of the table next to him, holding himself steady. The air suddenly feels too thin, the walls too close. Too many people. Too many strangers who know too much about him. He's saved from having to come up with some sort of response by the sound of the door opening. Everyone turning as the pastor enters the room in her black robes. Sarah gives him one last cold look before pulling away. Remus wonders, as he struggles to get his breathing under control, if that made her feel better. He hopes that it did.
It's good to see you all, though unfortunate that it should be under such tragic circumstances.
The pastor, an older woman with thinning grey hair and a kind face, gathers everyone around her. Well, everyone but Remus, who is still currently clinging to the coffee cart.
The ceremony is ready to begin, so once we finish talking, I'll lead you all into the chapel. The first 2 rows of seats have been reserved for the family.
Listen to a rendition of Amazing Grace, which I encourage you to sing along with, and then we'll have a husband and son come up to say a few words.
Her eyes bounce around the room, looking, no doubt, for the men in question.
Just son.
Remus forces himself to let go of the cart and stand up straight, his skin feeling clammy and too hot. A A few people step back so that the pastor can find him.
I'm sorry?
Remus swallows.
It's just her son. It's just me.
Ah.
Thankfully, she doesn't seem to feel the need to ask any more questions.
No problem. No problem at all. Now, are we ready?
Yes.
All right then, if you'll all follow me.
She leads them back into the hallway, Remus trailing as far behind as he can, keeping his eyes on the floor and off of the faces of his mother's family. He wonders, absent-mindedly, if he's leaving dirty footprints all over the pale carpet. He hadn't even thought to wash his shoes, and it would be so like him to scar the funeral home.
Oh, thank Merlin. Remus.
As he looks up at the sound of his name, he finds Alice and Frank standing by the front door. He stops dead in his tracks, everyone ahead of him filing through the wooden doors into the chapel. Alice rushes forward, instantly wrapping him in a hug that feels infinitely better than the one he'd received from Miriam.
What? How are you here?
He is still slightly in shock as Alice pulls back.
Mary gave us directions since she lives around here.
Remus had forgotten that Mary's house was nearby.
Sorry we're late. We took the day off, but Moody still had us doing paperwork this morning.
Alice rolls her eyes. Remus still struggling to wrap his mind around the fact that they're standing in front of him.
But the oars, I thought you didn't get days off.
Frank shrugs.
Family emergency.
Family emergency. Those words lodge themselves somewhere in Remus's throat, the way Frank says them so casually, like it's obvious. Family emergency. Alice's eyes are soft as she reaches out and squeezes his arm gently. He shakes his head, trying to get a grip on himself. Everything about this day has been surreal, honestly.
Thank you.
His eyes move from Alice to Frank, trying to make them understand how much this means, knowing that he can't possibly. Alice pulls him in for another hug and Remus lets himself lean on her for a minute, soaking up her strength.
Remus.
He pulls away, looking over his shoulder to see his Aunt Miriam in the chapel doorway.
We're about to start.
Right.
Remus looks back at his friends, reluctant to leave them. Alice gives his arm another good squeeze. Frank smiles sadly at him.
We'll be there.
Remus nods, turning away to follow his aunt into the next room, feeling his heart ache as he does.
Certainly are popular, aren't you?
The pair of them are walking down the aisle, pews on either side of them.
Not really.
Remus looks back over his shoulder as Alice and Frank slip in and take their seats in the back row.
Just lucky.
They slide into the front pew, Remus thankfully on the end, so the only person he has to sit next to is Miriam. Part of him wants to know why she's so nice to him, why she still came around when none of the rest of his mum's family did. He's not sure why he never asked before, why he never asked his mum anything about her family before. You took her for granted, whispers the nasty voice in his head. You thought she would always be there, thought she belonged to you, existed for you. He clenches his teeth, trying to focus on the pasta instead of his spiraling thoughts.
Hope was a warm, compassionate, and vibrant woman who always went out of her way to help others, no matter what.
The problem is, Remus had taken his mother for granted. She'd made him her whole life, and it had never occurred to him that before he was born, before the accident with Greyback, all that time she spent worrying about him she had filled with something else, with someone else.
O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love, for it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life.
Was his mother religious? He'd never seen her pray, never been made to say grace at the table. Not that his father would have allowed it. Far too muggle. Had she gone to church every Sunday when she was a kid? Did she believe in heaven? Did Remus? He didn't think so, but then he'd never given it much thought. A recording of Amazing Grace starts up, and those in the congregation that know the song start to sing along softly. Remus doesn't know it well enough, so he occupies his time looking respectfully around the room. Up at the front of the room, surrounding the pastor, are many photos of his mother. In a lot of them, she appears younger and happier than Remus has ever seen it. In some of them, his mother has a bob with bangs, She has freckles on her cheeks that are squished up against her sister's face. Her front tooth is missing. He barely recognizes her. Remus looks over to Miriam to find her face streaked with tears. He wonders what she's thinking about. What memories she has of his mum. All the stories he hasn't heard. And suddenly he has a horrible sinking feeling that everyone knew his mother better than he did. There are other photos where his mother is slowly growing older. A teenager in floral dresses, her hair down to her waist. A university student at a Christmas party covered in tinsel. Walking across the stage in a cap and gown, holding a diploma proudly in front of her. Remus has no idea what she studied. He never asked. In all these photos, his mother is smiling, face free of the nervous cracks that he'd grown so used to. The ones that never really went away, no matter how genuinely happy she seemed. The woman in these photos is beaming. She's light. One of the photos far off to the side is of his parents on their wedding day. His father is wearing wizard dress robes, but they're black and white so they could easily be explained away as some new suit style. Or so Remus expects. His mother looks like a painting. Hair braided, dress covered in lace, blooming out around her like she's in the center of a cloud. His father peers at the mogul camera uncertainly, but his mother is still smiling. Remus wonders if that was the last time she would be that happy, that carefree.
Well, that was certainly beautiful. What a lovely soul. And now we will be hearing a few words from her son, Remus John Lupin.
Oh. Remus's heart drops into the pit of his stomach as he feels all the eyes in the room fall on him. He's never wanted to be able to apparate so badly in his entire life. On shaking legs, he rises to his feet, stumbling up to the lectern, where the pastor gives him a supportive pat on the back before shuffling off to the side, leaving Remus to face the room alone. His throat feels tight, the air suddenly too dry as he reaches into his pocket and smooths out the parchment he's been clutching all day. The faces in the seats in front of him are going blurry. He clears his throat, rubbing at his eyes, but it doesn't help. His whole body suddenly feels like it's blurring. Something left out in the rain, all his colours running together. How is he meant to talk about his mum when he didn't even know her? When he never tried to? Something starts scratching at the inside of his skin and he brings his hand up to the base of his throat to keep the sobs from being able to escape. He just needs another chance. To speak to her. To listen. To let her tell him all the stories he never asked about. Never made her feel important enough to share. He's been standing up here silent for too long. He tries to open his mouth again but quickly shuts it, afraid of what might come out. He should have told them this was a terrible idea. He doesn't give speeches, doesn't cut himself open in front of crowds of strangers. I mean, Christ, he can barely open up to the people he trusts. He grips the lectern like it's the last life raft in the middle of the ocean, forcing himself to look at the page in front of him, to say something. Then, in the distance, he sees someone get up. 3 someones, actually. Silently, James, Sirius, and Peter make their way down the aisle, like it's the most natural thing in the world. Not one of them looks uncertain, or like they aren't sure whether or not it's allowed, and Remus watches them, desperate. The minute they're close enough, Sirius's hand finds his lower back, James's is on his shoulder, Peter's circling his wrist. The 3 of them crowding around him. Remus feels himself sag into their touches, into the warmth of their bodies, the comfort of it. Home, he thinks. This is home. They don't speak. They don't need to. With a shaking inhale, he looks back down at the page in front of him, words slowly coming into focus. Remus swears he'll never love anyone or anything as much as he loves the 3 boys currently holding him up.
My mum liked to sing Billie Holiday when she baked.
The reception is in a small room connected to the chapel. They move the coffin in there. His mum's coffin. Remus doesn't look at it. Instead, he looks at the dozen or so tiny triangle sandwiches on black plastic trays.
Damn.
Remus looks up as his friend runs a flustered hand through his hair.
I didn't know this many sandwiches existed. A sandwich is some kind of major food group for muggles I wasn't aware of.
Cheese and tomato.
Peter picks up a ham sandwich and glares down at it.
Really?
James's eyes start scanning the table in front of him.
Seems like an oversight on their part.
Honestly, it's the best one.
Agreed.
Marlene, who is currently standing next to Peter, rolls her eyes.
You two are idiots.
Oi!
Remus smiles despite himself, not really paying attention to the food he's putting on his plate. He doesn't expect he'll be eating any of it. He just wants something to do with his hands. Sirius gives him a nudge with his elbow as they move away from the table, leaving James and Peter to bicker about what the perfect ratio of jam to peanut butter is.
You doing okay?
Sirius leans against the wall next to him.
Hey.
Sirius nudges his foot.
Sorry.
Remus blinks, eyes going to the coffin behind them, and then instantly down to the floor. He's not sure if he feels like crying or laughing.
Is this supposed to help?
Is what supposed to help?
Being here. Doing this. Is it supposed to help? Because I don't feel any better. I don't feel like I have closure or whatever the fuck this is supposed to be. It's just...
He shakes his head.
It's like I'm being crushed by something. By the weight of this.
I don't think anything helps.
It causes Remus to look up. Sirius is watching him, eyes full, overflowing, but with what Remus can't tell. Something like affection, but more.
This is a big hurt, Mooney.
A big hurt.
He scrubs at his eyes with the hand that isn't currently holding a paper plate full of food he doesn't want to eat.
That sounds about right.
Stuff like this?
Sirius shrugs, hands slipping into his pockets.
It doesn't get fixed. Doesn't get put down. Not for a long time. You just learn how to carry it.
Remus looks at him for a minute before shaking his head.
Christ. Sirius Black, when did you get so wise?
That brings a smile to Sirius's face that brightens the whole room.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you knew. I'm kind of a genius.
Dumbledore better watch out.
That old hack? He ain't got nothing on me.
And suddenly Remus feels the desperate need to be closer to him. To wrap himself in Sirius's smell and his warmth and his weight. He can't, of course. Not here in some muggle suburb surrounded by his mother's potentially religious family who already hates him. So instead he settles for pushing his foot into Sirius's.
Thanks for coming. For doing this. I know it's... not the most convenient thing.
Sirius gives him a weird look.
Remus.
He tilts his head a little closer.
It wouldn't matter if a funeral was on top of bloody Mount Everest. We would still be here.
Why? Remus almost asks. Has been dying to ask everyone all day. Why are you here? It's how he felt first year too, when James and Sirius started sitting with him at meals even when they didn't go down to the Great Hall together. When they'd include him in their conversations out of the blue, invite him to join their pranks. You could be friends with anyone, he thought. Why on earth would you choose me? He never did ask. He doesn't ask now. Sirius wouldn't understand. Everyone has always wanted Sirius, even when they were kids. Sirius Black walks down the hallway and people look up, move closer. Some kind of primal instinct pulling them in. Even his family, in their own psychotic way, had wanted Sirius. Wanted him desperately. Really, in the end, it was Sirius who hadn't wanted them back. Lyle's voice echoes throughout Remus's head.
I thought it would be different.
Remus doesn't know what his father wants. But it certainly isn't him. Wasn't his mother. His eyes go back to the coffin.
Do you want to see her?
Remus feels his heart drop at the question. He keeps staring at the polished wooden box, the top half thrown open, people walking past it like an exhibit at the Natural History Museum.
Doesn't feel real.
He doesn't look at Sirius as his throat grows tight.
None of this feels real. I think there's a part of my brain that still thinks she's back at home, you know?
He tries to swallow.
But if I see her, if I look at her face...
It'll be real.
Remus nods slowly.
I'm not sure I want it to be. I'd rather pretend she ran away. Finally told my dad to fuck off and now she's out there somewhere on some wild adventure.
He likes that idea. His mother on the highway in a red convertible, the top down, a silk handkerchief in her hair, smiling the way she used to, the way she had in all those photos. He feels Sirius's fingers brush lightly against the back of his hand, bringing Remus's attention back, pulling him in, and then he shrugs.
Maybe she is.
Old habits die hard. It's not that he's looking for Lily, at least not consciously, but for an embarrassing number of years he was in the habit of knowing where she was at all times. The map did not help with that obsession. So if he's being honest with himself, the reason he ends up outside, walking through the parking lot of the funeral home, is because part of his brain has trained itself to find her. And he does, leaning against the brick wall by the dumpsters.
Hell sticks again, really.
He brings those green eyes in his direction, a cloud of smoke blowing out to the corner of her mouth.
I swear I haven't had any since the summer.
James takes up the wall space beside her.
Whatever you say, Evans.
She looks back out at the cars. There's a cool breeze that pushes against them, moving the clouds overhead, letting beams of sunlight filter through. Lily looks down at her hand, turning the cigarette over between her fingers.
Being in there just reminded me of my dad is all.
Oh.
Because, like an idiot, he's gone and forgotten that Lily's dad was dead.
Was his funeral like this?
He nods at the building behind them. Lily takes a drag from her cigarette, still not looking at James as she tilts her head back and blows the smoke up into the air. The smell burns James's nose and the back of his throat, but he refuses to cough.
I don't know.
You don't know?
James is confused, pushing his glasses up so that he can rub at his eyes.
Because it was so long ago, you mean? Like, you can't remember?
No.
James's glasses fall back into place and he stares at her, red hair loose, hanging down her back, freckles paler than they were this summer. He supposes that's the Scottish countryside's doing. Too bad. He's always liked her freckles. She takes another deep pull of her cigarette before she continues.
I didn't go to my dad's funeral. Miscommunication or lack of communication, I guess.
James has no idea what to say to that, but luckily Lily doesn't let him suffer for too long.
It's hard for muggles to get in contact with wizards, and it was still also new to us back then.
Shit, Lily.
She's looking at him right now, stare burning, too hot to hold. There were years when he would have done anything for this, to have her attention for even a second. Years when he did do anything, stunts and grand romantic gestures. The irony, he supposes, is that all he ever needed to do was this. Eventually Lily looks away again, leaving James a little breathless, like someone who's just stepped back from the edge of a cliff.
It is what it is.
She shrugs. As Sirius Black's best mate, James can spot a forced shrug a mile away.
Were you close? You and your dad?
She bites down on her lip, flipping the ash off the end of her cigarette with the tip of her thumb. James doesn't think he'll ever get over how bloody cool she looks with those things. He definitely can't let Sirius see her.
Yeah, we were close. As close as you can be with your parents anyway. But maybe that would have changed the longer I spent at Hogwarts.
What do you mean? He didn't like magic?
No, he loved magic, actually. God, I don't know who was more excited when I got my letter. Me or him? He was absolutely obsessed. He used to make me tell him everything we learned. Show him all my school supplies.
She smiles, scuffing her shoes against the asphalt.
You should have seen the way his face lit up the first time we went to Diagon Alley. I thought he was going to burst.
He sounds brilliant.
Yeah. He was. He saw the fun in life, you know?
Yeah.
But then something comes over her face. He'd call it a shadow, but that wouldn't be quite right. It's something heavy. Something that anchors down the corners of her smile.
It builds walls between you, though. Between you and the people you love.
She looks down at the cigarette in her hand before flicking it off into the distance.
What does?
She looks up at him, green eyes bright.
Going places they can't follow.
Lily Evans is a powerful witch, even when she isn't using her wand. The strength in those words vibrates through James like the hands on his shoulders, shaking him.
I'm sorry.
Don't be. We all make sacrifices for magic. I wouldn't change it. Wouldn't give it back. Not even for my family. Does that make me sound horrible?
No. Makes you sound pretty fucking ruthless, though.
I'll take it. Ruthless. I like that.
Good.
They stand in silence for a minute, both looking out at the parking lot in front of them and the street beyond that. Cars speeding along the road like comets. James is always surprised by how big the Muggle world feels. How full of strangers. There's no anonymity amongst wizards. Not really. Everyone is connected to everyone else, and if you're not, well, that's its own identity.
How's Remus doing?
Lily startles James out of his thoughts.
Remus? Merlin, I dunno. Hard to tell with him. He keeps everything pretty tightly bottled.
He takes a moment, running a hand through his hair.
He's doing better than I would be, I'll tell you that. If my mum was...
He can't say it. Can't even think it. A shiver running through his whole body.
Honestly, I don't know how he's still standing.
I think Remus expects the worst. Makes it easier to handle when it happens. Not easy, but...
He's been through a lot.
Lily looks over at him, but when James doesn't elaborate, she doesn't push him for details.
I've been impressed with Sirius. He's been really good these past few days. He's helped. I guess, I don't know. I knew they were sort of a match, but I didn't realise until this week how much that meant. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's been nice to watch, the two of them. You can really tell we're serious. It's like a weight has been lifted off of them.
I think he was suffocating himself for a little while there.
James rubs his hand at the back of his neck. Lily looks like she might say something else, but at that moment a car comes barreling into the parking lot, and while James is the first to admit that he knows nothing about cars, this definitely does not seem like the right way to drive one.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Lily instantly pushes off the wall.
Who the hell is that?
Lily rolls her eyes as the car screeches to a halt in front of them.
Mary.
Almost at that exact moment, the window on the driver's side rolls down, revealing a smiling Mary and a nervous Marlene.
What's up, lovebirds?
Mary looks far too pleased with herself. Lily ignores her, walking up to the car with James following behind.
What are you doing?
We stole my dad's car.
Yes, thanks. I can see that. My question is, why?
Mary rolls her eyes, as though the answer ought to be obvious.
Well, rescuing Remus, clearly.
I just want to say that I told her this was a terrible idea.
Rescuing Remus? Mary, it's his mother's funeral.
Excuse me? You don't rescue Remus. He's a marauder. We rescue Remus.
Mary arches her brow, leaning around Lily to look pointedly at James.
Do the Marauders have a car?
No.
Then it looks like you're not the hero today, Potter.
Excuse me. Hello? You both seem to be forgetting that this is Remus's mother's funeral.
I told her.
Lily, come on, you saw him in there. He's miserable.
Lily looks back at her, clearly waiting for Mary to realise the absurdity of what she's just said. But, of course, she doesn't. Lily pinches the bridge of her nose.
Yes, Mary. Of course he's miserable. It's his mother's funeral.
I dunno. I'm with MacDonald on this one. I don't think being in there is doing him any good.
Thank you!
Oh. You two are absolute lunatics. You can't just drag him away.
Drag? Who said anything about dragging?
We're just going to ask him, Lily. Merlin. Give him the option if he wants it.
Oh, he wants it.
You can't possibly know that.
That's what I said.
Okay, I'll just go ask him, shall I?
No, Christ, James!
Lily grabs hold of his wrist, her grip impressively strong.
You can't just... It's insensitive. You'll make him think you don't want to be here.
It's a funeral, not a birthday party, Lily. No one wants to be here.
But James looks back at her, making sure she can understand how sincerely he means this.
I'm going to be there for Remus, however he needs me. But I'm telling you, Evans, Remus Lupin hates crowds, hates small talk, hates people fussing over him. Everything that's going on in there is basically the antithesis of what he wants. So I'm going to give him an out. If he wants to take it, great. If not, I will sit in that room for the next week if that's what he needs. Okay?
Lily bites her lip, looking only slightly less worried.
Here.
Okay, but I'm coming with you.
James sends her a lopsided grin.
Don't you trust me?
To be tactful. Absolutely not.
The smell of stale perfume hits James full force as they walk back inside. He's never been to a Muggle funeral before, but he hopes that they don't all take place in buildings like this, as if death wasn't depressing enough. They walk past a group of women at the entrance who definitely give James the evil eye.
Boy, are all Muggles this suspicious?
Lily looks at him and then over her shoulder at the women behind them, smirking slightly.
I don't think they're suspicious. I just think they don't like you.
Impossible. I'm universally adored.
Lily shakes her head but can't quite keep the smile off her face.
James! Lily!
James looks up to see Alice beckoning them over to the corner where her, Peter and Frank are currently huddling crumb-filled paper plates in their hands.
Now, where have you two been?
Alice raises her eyebrows as her gaze bounces between the pair of them in an insinuating manner.
Merlin, Alice. We're at a funeral.
That's not quite a denial.
Have you seen Remus?
He's over there.
Frank gestures with his chin at the front of the room where Sirius and Remus are standing side by side at his mum's coffin.
Ah.
Told you.
We'll wait.
James.
Lily.
Wait for what?
Maria's gotten it into her head that Remus needs rescuing.
She's not wrong.
Alice.
Alice holds her hands up in surrender.
I'm just saying, he looks more and more defeated with every passing second, and he wasn't exactly in great shape to start with.
Well, can you blame him? This place gives me the creeps. Especially that thing.
Peter gestures at the coffin with his half-eaten ham sandwich. For a moment, everyone goes silent, and James feels his hackles raise. He turns to face Peter properly.
That thing?
Shit, sorry, I didn't mean it like that.
That thing is Remus's mum. And if I ever hear you speak about her like that again, I swear, Peter.
James, I know. I'm sorry, it slipped out.
The problem is James can't quite see how something like that just slips out. And Christ, what if Remus had been here? What if he had heard? Frank nudges him and James tears his eyes away from Peter to watch Sirius and Remus walking away from the coffin.
Okay. You lot go away by the car, yeah? It's just in the back lot.
James, you don't know if this is what he wants.
I have a pretty good idea.
He starts moving and a second later he feels Lily matching his strides.
Hey.
They meet Sirius and Remus by the wall. Remus is pale-faced, blue bruises under his eyes, blonde hair almost as much of a mess as James's.
Prongs.
Sirius tries to act casually, though James can see the tension in him. It's hard, watching other people hurting and not being able to stop it.
So...
Listen, Remus.
It's work for James not to roll his eyes. Sirius raises his brow but doesn't say anything.
I just want you to know that this is all up to you, and all any of us want is to make sure that you're okay. Or as okay as you can be.
Remus looks from her to James and back again.
Thanks? Why do I feel like I'm about to get kidnapped?
Well, funny you should say that because... Ow!
James winces as Lily elbows his side.
Basically, our friends are ridiculous.
That pulls a smile out of Remus, even if it's only a ghost of what it normally is.
I've noticed that, yeah.
And they seem to be under the impression that you need to be rescued.
Remus gets that wrinkle between his eyebrows that he always does when he's confused, and Sirius turns to James, mouthing, "Rescued?"
I don't understand.
Well, that's probably because you aren't insane.
James rolls his eyes.
Listen, Mary's gone and nicked her dad's car, and is waiting outside in the parking lot in case you want to make a speedy escape. Ow!
He rounds on Lily.
Was that necessary? I was literally just relaying the situation.
He rubs irritably at his side.
It was necessary. It made me feel better.
Gritting his teeth, he turns back to Remus.
What do you say, mate? It's up to you.
Remus hesitates, looking over his shoulder at the coffin. At his mum.
Fuck it. Let's get out of here.
You sure?
Sirius pulls lightly on Remus's sleeve, bringing his eyes back to him. Remus nods.
Yeah, I've said my goodbyes. Besides, I can't breathe in this place.
Well, alright then.
James looks very pointedly at Lily.
Happy now.
Come on, everyone else is already outside. Remus, do you need to say goodbye, or...?
Remus's eyes trail over the people he'd been sitting with during the ceremony. James doesn't recognise any of them. Can't remember seeing pictures of them in Remus's house or ever hearing him talk about any family other than his parents. Eventually Remus shakes his head.
No. Let's just get out of here, okay?
Lily nods.
Okay.
The beauty of Lily Evans, James is coming to realise, well, one of many, is that she always knows when to push and when to let things go.
Finally!
Mary leans out of the window of the still idling car.
Are we all supposed to fit in there?
Now looking at the car properly, James can understand the confusion. It can't be more than a 5-seater tops. Mary rolls her eyes.
One day with a bunch of muggles and you forget that magic exists. Alice cast an extension charm on it. Now get in! If you stand here any longer, I'm going to be personally responsible for giving all of us carbon monoxide poisoning.
They slide into the back of the car, which has, indeed, been stretched out like a limousine.
All right, Captain. Where to now?
Seaside, obviously.
Mary starts pulling out into the road. James turns to Lily for an explanation.
Seaside?
Do what it says on the tin, Potter.
She leans forward between the front 2 seats.
Mary, that's an hour's drive.
Ha! Not the way I drive.
Why does that sound like a threat?
Because it is.
I can help too.
Everyone turns to look at Alice.
You know how to drive?
Absolutely not.
She slides her wand out of her sleeve.
But I know how to make things move faster.
Beside her, Frank is shaking his head.
Moody's gonna kill us.
Please, Moody loves me.
God, I've missed you, Alice.
Lily sits back beside James, rolling down her window and letting the crisp fall wind whip through the car. The clouds are almost gone now, just in time to watch the sky start to warm up as the sun dips towards the horizon, pinks and oranges mixing over their heads.
How long until the last port key?
11:30. I think McGonagall wanted to make sure Remus didn't feel rushed.
James nods, eyes trailing over to the boy in question who has pulled his tie loose around his neck, undoing the first few buttons of his shirt and dropping his head back against the seats. Sirius looks up then, eyes meeting James's. He can read the concern in his friend's stare and knows that feeling intimately. He's felt it every time Regulus has come back from Grimmauld torn apart in ways that James can't even imagine. And all he's been able to do is stand there. Don't worry, he wants to tell Sirius. We'll take care of him. Even if we don't know how to put someone back together, we'll figure it out. We always do. Alice rests her head on Frank's shoulder, though every once in a while James sees her flick her wand. She catches him staring and winks. Not 20 minutes into the drive, Peter is passed out and leaning dangerously close to Sirius, who looks about ready to hex him. Next to James, Lily has her head out the window, hair whipping back from her face, sunset glowing in her green eyes. James very purposefully doesn't look too closely or think about the way she smells of apples and clean laundry. Eventually, he feels his own eyes drifting closed.
Merlin, he sleeps like a corpse.
It's 'cause he gets up at 5 in the bleeding morning.
I can't get him. Sirius, can you...
Stand aside. Let the master work. Prongs! Get the fuck up!
James startles, clutching at his ears as he sits up, banging his head against the car door as he goes.
Godric's balls!
James glares up at a very smug-looking Sirius. Lily is standing beside him, trying and failing not to laugh. It takes James a minute to realise it's gotten dark, the car around him empty.
We've arrived then?
Sirius nods, reaching into the car and clapping James' shoulder.
We've arrived. Might want to take off your shoes. Sand.
James rubs at the back of his head bitterly.
Sorry.
Lily starts walking after Sirius.
I tried to do it gently, but you weren't budging.
It's fine.
He swings his legs out of the car and starts to unlace his shoes. Down on the beach he can see a fire growing, the blurry outlines of his friends sitting on the ground around it. As far as he can tell, they're the only ones here, whatever here is. Leaving his shoes and socks behind, James walks across the gravelly beach towards his friends, their voices echoing through the night as the dark waves in front of them stretch on endlessly.
James, you're awake.
He smiles, dropping down next to Remus.
I am.
Remus smiles a little before looking down at his hands. He's gotten rid of his shoes and socks too, along with his suit jacket, despite the chill. Remus always runs hot. James thinks it's a werewolf thing, but he never wants to ask.
What's that look for?
James knocks his shoulder against the other boy. Remus shakes his head.
Nothing, just... you and Sirius. All day, every chance you get, you've been... I don't know, at my side. One of you on each. Like I'm the queen or something.
Pretty sure Sirius is the queen.
Getting Remus to laugh feels good, hearing that sound come out of him. The past few days he's been more or less catatonic. After a few seconds, James nudges him again.
Is it too much? Do you need me to back off?
There's that smile again. Not quite amused, more fond.
No. No, it's... nice.
James nods.
Good.
MacDonald, you've lost the plot.
Oh, what do you know? You're not even on the team anymore. Listen, I'm telling you, Slytherin is still our biggest competition.
I will not lose to those jackasses again. Once was enough.
Amen.
Frank nods.
How are you doing so far?
He turns to James now.
Sorry I haven't been able to make it out to the games. I've been trying, but...
James waves him off.
It's fine, Frank, really. You're off saving the world.
We won our first game.
We killed our first game, fucking slaughtered Hufflepuff.
Frank smiles.
Yeah?
James nods. It had been a good game, his first as captain. He was proud of it.
Slytherin won their match too, though.
That had also been a good game. Regulus in his Quidditch kit never got old. James had barely been able to focus.
That's what I'm saying.
Slytherin is all flash.
All your brother, more like.
Marlene shakes her head.
That kid is mad.
James sees Sirius's jaw clench in the dim light.
That's one word for it.
And for a moment he wants to reach over and shake him. Wants to ask him if he knows. Knows what they've done to Regulus. Knows about Lucius. But he can't know. Can he? He wouldn't talk like that if he did.
Regulus is no better than Marlene. He just has Mommy's expensive broom. That's my whole point. There's no substance on that team.
James's fists clench.
Fire's getting a bit low.
James gets to his feet, dusting the sand off his trousers.
I'm gonna go find us some more wood.
Ooh, I'll come.
Alice gets to her feet too.
Love a good late night beach stroll.
He doesn't miss the concerned look Remus sends him, and he feels guilt fill the pit of his stomach for making him worry. Today of all days. But if he stays, he'll end up saying something he isn't supposed to. So he starts walking.
Oh, Merlin.
James winces as Alice falls into step beside him, the voices of their friends growing dim.
Is this beach made of sand or rocks?
This close to London? You're lucky if it's just rocks.
James makes a face, looking down at his feet and doing his best to avoid the rubbish. After a few moments of silence, Alice bumps his shoulder with hers.
Hey, you alright?
Me? Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I be?
She shrugs. Alice has always had the infuriating ability to make everything seem easy.
That was a pretty quick exit back there.
He grimaces, looking out at the water beside them, hoping she doesn't notice.
Was it?
Worried about Quidditch?
A bit, yeah. It must seem so stupid to you.
She looks up at him.
What must?
He shrugs, hands sliding into his pockets.
Quidditch, Hogwarts, all of it. Now that you're, out there in the real world, doing important things, things that matter.
Ah. I saw my first dead body.
James comes to an abrupt stop. Alice continuing on for a few seconds before she realizes, turning back to him. Somehow she makes even this seem easy.
I'm sorry?
Moody really does love me. Well, not like in a weird way, but I'm good at this. The aura thing. I know no one thought I would be.
Who didn't think you would be?
Alice arches her brow.
Oh, come on, James. None of you were exactly like, wow, Alice, aura, I can totally see that for you.
Just because I didn't see it coming doesn't mean I didn't think you would be good at it. You're brilliant.
She smiles at that, moonlight glittering off the chain around her neck.
Oh, shucks. I forgot how sweet you can be.
He frowns, not entirely sure he wants to be sweet.
I think you were going somewhere before this.
She nods.
Yeah, I was. I'm good at my job. Moody likes that, so when he needs extra hands, he takes me. Frank sometimes too, but not this time.
There's something eerie about having this conversation in the dark, alone, on some random beach.
It was a woman. 40 years old. She has 2 kids. Well, had, anyway.
There's a pause, and though Alice shows no outward signs of distress, James can tell that something isn't quite right. That she's holding herself too still. Her expression mild, which is rarely something you can call Alice.
They tortured her. Crucio, for hours, Moody thinks, before they killed her.
James feels a chill run down his spine.
Death Eaters?
She nods.
I didn't read anything.
No, well, you wouldn't have. She was a muggle.
Oh. Why her?
Alice shrugs.
No idea. Because she was there. Because they could.
She pauses, turning to face the water.
That's the thing that gets me. That they could. No one has any idea who they are, or if they do, they're not telling us. Hell, they might even be Ministry employees.
James feels his chest grow tight.
Do you know that for certain? That there are Death Eaters in the Ministry?
Alice nods slowly.
Moody is pretty convinced. He has names, but he won't tell me who.
Well, is he telling someone?
She looks over at him, something like pity in her eyes.
Tell who, James?
Which feels like a punch to the gut.
The Minister?
Jury's still out on whether he's one of them or just being manipulated. But he's awfully close to Malfoy and Lestrange.
Malfoy. James feels his fists curl tight, nails digging into his palms.
Well, what are those assholes doing there anyway? I mean, they practically scream Death Eater.
Like I said, the Minister's close to them. They're close to most people.
It's the closest to defeated he's ever seen Alice.
We're pretty alone in there. The Aura department is the last safe haven, and that's only because of Moody, and now Lestrange is trying to petition the Minister for the right to add to the force.
What? That can't happen.
Alice shrugs.
Shouldn't happen. But it might. They might replace Moody altogether, and then... well... I don't know. We'll have to go underground.
James just stares at her, feeling like he's had the rug pulled out from under him. He knew things were bad, he did, with the attacks in Diagon, outside the Ministry, now apparently on innocent muggles. But he hadn't realised...
So what do we do?
Why hadn't his dad said anything? Why hadn't he said more? Alice reaches out, taking hold of his arm and squeezing. After a few more moments of silence, she turns to look at him, smiling a little again.
You want to know a secret? A good one, this time?
James isn't sure he can handle the emotional whiplash, but he nods anyway. With her free hand, she reaches into her shirt and pulls out the necklace James had noticed earlier. Hanging on the end, he sees a ring, the gold band wrapping around blue stones, one large one right in the centre. He looks from the piece of jewellery to Alice and back again.
It's nice.
Frank gave it to me.
Cool.
He watches her bite down on her lip like she's holding back a laugh.
It's his mother's.
James continues to stare at her.
Why are you wearing it on a chain?
Didn't seem like the right time today to tell everyone.
James feels like he's missing something here.
To tell everyone that Frank gave you a ring?
Yes.
And then... Oh!
Holy fuck!
Ladies and gentlemen, I think he's got it.
Holy shit, Alice, holy shit. Are you and Frank getting married?
She tugs on his arm.
Quiet, I haven't been able to tell the girls yet, and I don't want them to find out by you bellowing into the night.
James shakes his head, raking a hand through his hair.
That's...
Mad?
She slips the chain back inside her shirt.
Yes, definitely, but also... Merlin, congratulations.
He pulls her in for a hug, squeezing her tight. Alice giving about as good as she gets.
Thanks. Took me by surprise too, honestly.
Fucking Frank.
James swipes a hand across his face.
Yeah. Always so reasonable, and then one day he just got down on one knee.
And you said yes like the nutter you are.
Yes, exactly.
James smiles back at her.
Really, Alice, I'm so happy for you.
Something more subdued comes over her, dimming the light in her eyes ever so slightly.
But do you see?
James blinks.
See what?
Her hand goes to her neck, grabbing hold of the chain.
This is what we do.
It takes a minute for James to catch on, to realise that she's answering his question. He arches his brow.
We get married?
Alice smiles ruefully.
Sure. Or we worry about Quidditch, or think about the fact that Lily Evans hasn't stopped staring at us all day.
James rolls his eyes, but Alice seems not to notice it.
People make the mistake, I think, when things get hard, of thinking that what they love doesn't matter, that it's, I don't know, a luxury or frivolous. But I saw my first dead body. My first, not my last. And I can tell you that the only thing that matters right now is what you love.
She squeezes James's arm again.
Don't give them up, the things that make you happy, James, just because you think it's the right thing to do, the heroic thing, because it isn't. Take what brings you joy and fucking savor every last piece of it.
It's terrifying, hearing Alice talk like this. Light-hearted, good time Alice. James is pretty sure he's never even seen her in a bad mood. Yet here she is talking like the world is ending.
Okay. Yeah, okay, Alice.
She nods, before pulling him in for another hug.
Hey.
His chin rests on top of her head.
Since I'm the first person you told, does that mean I get to be in the wedding?
She smiles against his chest.
That's not how anything works, but sure. We needed a flower girl anyway.
It feels good to laugh, even if it doesn't last. He told Regulus he probably wouldn't make it tonight, that they'd be back late, that Remus would need him. So he doesn't know why the first thing he does when they get back to the castle is head in the direction of the come-and-go room, muggle suit jacket in hand, shoes full of sand. He mumbles something to the boys, but none of them question it, used to it by now. Besides, they're all knackered. They barely made it back for the last port key, and it's past midnight now. James doesn't have the map, doesn't have the invisibility cloak. All in all, this is a sloppy and pointless mission, but after his chat with Alice, after the whole day really, he just needs to see him. He steps through the door almost the minute it appears, walking into a dimmer room than usual. Most of the lights are out, but the fire is lit, burning low in the hearth. It takes James's eyes a minute to adjust, a minute to find Regulus curled up on the bed, asleep. Reasonably, he shouldn't be here, shouldn't have bothered, and that makes all sorts of feelings bubble up inside of James. He throws his jacket over a nearby chair, slipping off his socks and shoes as he walks towards the bed. Regulus always looks so young when he's asleep, curled up on his side, hair hiding his face. James goes as far as to crawl on top of the mattress, but then he stops.
Reg.
He wants to wake him, but not to touch him.
Reg. Regulus.
Regulus's eyes fly open, his hand shooting out in James's direction, trying to grab him or push him away. James can't tell which.
Hey.
He lets Regulus keep his hand on his chest, holding them apart.
It's okay. It's me. It's just me.
Regulus blinks, his breathing evening out as he pulls himself up to sitting.
I didn't mean to fall asleep.
He lets his hand drop so he can scrub at his eyes.
I'm surprised you're here at all.
James watches Regulus come awake, the sharpness returning to his eyes, offset by his mussed hair and wrinkled clothes.
I didn't mean to do that either.
James nods, understanding.
Can I touch you?
Regulus pauses, his whole body going tense.
Give me a minute.
Of course.
James pushes himself up the bed, adjusting so that he can lean back against the headboard. Regulus watches him the whole time, eyes running him up and down, and James lets him. The truth is, Regulus looks the way most people touch. You can feel his eyes as much as any pair of hands.
What are you wearing?
James can't help but smile.
Muggle suit. You like it?
Regulus just keeps looking at him, and then, eventually, he reaches out his hand, James holding himself perfectly still, letting Regulus do what he wants. He rubs James's collar between his fingers, slowly moving along his shoulder, down his arm, over his rolled-up sleeve, pausing when he reaches his wrist. He hovers over the crossroad of veins there, over James's quickly increasing pulse. And then his touch is gone, taken back like a misspoken word. When Regulus raises his eyes to meet James's, his gaze is bright, Wide awake now.
Yes.
James blinks, like waking from a trance.
Sorry?
Regulus's lips quirk up.
Yes. I like it.
James feels his stomach flip.
You wear yours, I'll wear mine, baby.
Regulus rolls his eyes.
That is not a thing.
What's not a thing?
Baby. It's not going to be a thing.
James bites the inside of his cheeks, trying to keep a straight face.
I think there are a lot of people who would argue that it already is a thing.
Regulus gives him a flat look.
Yes, well, it's not going to be a thing between us.
That's what you said about Reg.
Not the same.
James shrugs.
Sort of the same. Baby.
Regulus makes a disgusted face before pouncing on James, pushing him down onto the bed. It's usually better like this, letting Regulus be the one to take charge, to decide when and how they touch. James doesn't mind, really.
I'm too nice to you. That's the problem.
Regulus pins James's arms to the bed.
Oh, is that the problem?
One of many.
Do you have a list?
James is joking, but when Regulus doesn't answer, his eyes grow wide.
Oh my god, you do have a list.
I have lots of lists.
Lists about me?
James is already grinning. Regulus scowls down at him.
I have lots of lists.
Merlin, you're a nerd about everything, aren't you?
Regulus's scowl deepens.
I'm not sure which is worse. Nerd or baby?
Depends on what you're into, I imagine.
Regulus rolls his eyes, pulling himself off of James and collapsing down next to him on the mattress.
You're impossible.
I thought I was ridiculous.
That too.
James smiles, turning his head to look at the other boy.
It's late. We should sleep. Can you stay here tonight?
His eyes are greedy for Regulus's face. The other boy nods, looking back at him.
Can you?
Yeah.
What about Lupin?
He has...
It's not that revealing to say that Remus has Sirius, but still, it makes something in his stomach squirm. Regulus is Sirius's brother, and this isn't his secret to tell.
He has the others.
Regulus nods, though James can tell his hiccup didn't go unnoticed.
How was it then? The funeral?
Fine, and also kind of horrible. Lyle didn't show.
Bastard. What?
James just shakes his head.
No, nothing. I just didn't think you cared that much for Remus.
Why? 'Cause he hexed me?
Sure. That and other things.
Regulus holds his gaze for a second longer before looking back up at the ceiling.
He thought he was protecting you.
Regulus shrugs.
I've been hexed for worse reasons.
That makes something in James's chest ache.
Besides, me liking or disliking Lupin doesn't change the fact that his father is a bastard.
Fair enough.
James wants to kiss him, but he doesn't ask. He tries not to. Not after Regulus has already said no. Feels too pushy. But fuck does he want to.
Okay, come on. Let's go. Bed.
James rolls off the mattress, undoing his shirt and trousers until he's standing in just his pants. He can feel Regulus's eyes on him again, but he tries to ignore it, pulling back the comforter and waiting for Regulus to move. He doesn't, still sitting at the end of the bed, looking.
Sorry, do you want me on the sofa tonight?
James takes a step back, but Regulus shakes his head.
No, sorry. I was just...
He shakes his head again, sliding off the bed and kicking off his shoes and trousers, but keeping his shirt on. When he looks up again, James arches his brow.
You were just... what?
Get in the bed, James.
Regulus slides under the covers himself, but James shakes his head.
You were what, Reg?
I don't know. Nothing. Will you just...
He waves impatiently at the space beside him, but James takes another step back.
If you don't want me in the bed tonight, that's okay. You know that, right? Don't say it is just because you think it's what I want.
Regulus glares at him for a good long minute before eventually throwing his arms up in surrender.
You just... You look like that.
James blinks, looking down at himself, and then back up at Regulus.
Look like what?
Regulus gestures unhelpfully at James's torso.
Like that. And I got... distracted. Can you please just get in here already? I have potions first period tomorrow, and I'd really rather not fall asleep in my cauldron.
But there is no way James is letting this go that easy.
Regulus, you've seen me like this before.
Yes, I know. And it's always... But this time you were wearing those stupid muggle clothes, which was bad enough. But then you were taking them off, and it was all a lot, honestly.
Despite his persistent glaring, the tops of Regulus's cheeks have started to go pink.
Okay, really? You're being a little much now, don't you think?
James wipes tears of mirth from his eyes.
Oh, Merlin, you're adorable.
Careful. I will hex you, James Potter. And I promise you it'll be a lot worse than a jelly leg jinx.
Sorry, it's hard to be scared of you when your cheeks are all pink like that.
Okay, that's it.
Regulus starts reaching out for the wand on his bedside table.
All right, I'm done, I promise.
James crawls into the bed.
You really are impossible.
And ridiculous.
That too.
James tries to catch his breath, settling into the comfortable bed. One of the many perks of being James Potter is that he has never had to suffer through a bad mattress, but this one really is a cut above the rest.
You can touch me if you want.
James turns to look at him.
Yeah?
Yes.
James shuffles over, wrapping one arm around Regulus's middle and pulling him in, the pair curving around one another. James resting his chin on top of Regulus's head. He lets himself relish in the warmth of him, listening as Regulus's breathing slowly evens out, becoming calm and then almost sluggish as he drifts closer to sleep.
Reg.
Mm-hmm.
James tightens his arms around him.
You make me happy.
There's no response, and James is fairly certain that Regulus has fallen asleep until a groggy voice spills into the night.
You are my happy.
Okay, so no one's answering. Can't you just let it rain?